Love is all a family needs, that's what Lee Rogers whispered to her sleeping twins as she counted her last $5 in a gas station parking lot. But when the Alpha King's lawyer appeared at dawn with keys to an estate worth millions, she'd learned that her dead husband's love had left behind secrets powerful enough to get them all killed. Chapter 1. The Last $5. The dashboard clock glowed 5:47 a.m. when Lee finished counting the coins for the third time. $5.32. That was it. That was everything standing between her twin 4-year-olds and complete destitution. In the back seat, Emma and Ethan slept tangled together under a donated blanket, their small bodies curved into each other the way they'd done since the womb. Lee's chest ached watching them, their faces peaceful, innocent, completely unaware that their mother had failed them so spectacularly. The eviction notice sat on the passenger seat, red letters screaming final, 3 months behind on rent. The landlord had been patient, more patient than most, but patience didn't pay mortgages. Yesterday, while the twins were at the free preschool program, she'd packed their entire lives into garbage bags and loaded them into this rusting Honda Civic. By the time she picked them up, they had no home to return to. "You promised," Leigh whispered, twisting the thin gold band on her finger. "You promised we'd be okay, Robbie." But Robbie Carney wasn't here to keep promises anymore. 6 months ago, she'd gotten the call every spouse dreads. Construction accident. Instantaneous. He didn't suffer. As if that made it better. As if knowing he died quickly filled the gaping hole he left behind. Her phone buzzed for the 47th time today. Debt collectors. Medical bills from Robbie's funeral. The credit cards she'd maxed, trying to keep them afloat. She'd stopped answering weeks ago. What was the point? You couldn't squeeze blood from a stone, and Lee Rogers was nothing but dust at this point. She was Omega. That single biological fact had shaped every difficulty in her life. Lower wages for unreliable workers who needed heat suppressants. Landlords who wouldn't rent to single Omega mothers. Employers who saw her wedding ring and asked, "Who'll watch the kids when you're in heat?" As if her biology made her incompetent. As if she hadn't been managing just fine until the universe ripped her alpha away. The suppressants had run out 2 weeks ago. She could feel the familiar warmth building at the base of her spine, a heat cycle coming, inevitable as a ticking time bomb. Without Robbie's claiming mark to stabilize her hormones, without medication to suppress them, she'd be vulnerable soon. Dangerously vulnerable. But suppressants cost money she didn't have. The choice had been simple. Feed her children or medicate herself. Emma and Ethan won. They would always win. Movement in the backseat made her turn. Ethan's eyes blinked open, those storm gray eyes so much like his father's it hurt to look at them sometimes. "Mama?" His voice was small, confused. "Where are we?" Lee forced brightness into her tone, that false cheerfulness every parent perfects when lying to protect their babies. "We're on an adventure, remember? We're camping." "In the car?" Emma stirred now too, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The best kind of camping. Lee climbed between the seats, gathering them both close. They smelled like the cheap motel soap from their last shower 3 days ago. And beneath that, the sweet scent that was uniquely theirs, milk and honey, her babies, her whole world. "Who needs a tent when we have our awesome car?" "I'm hungry," Ethan announced, always practical like his father. "Me too," Emma echoed. Lee's stomach was a hollow pit. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, rationing what little they had for the twins. "Then let's go get breakfast. I saw this gas station that has those mini donuts you love. The ones that cost 99 cents for a package of 6. She could buy 3 packages with her $5, give them 2 each, save the extras for lunch. She'd drink water and pretend she'd already eaten. They tumbled out of the car, the late September morning crisp enough to make Emma shiver in her too small jacket. Lee made a mental note. Find a shelter today, get on the waiting list for housing assistance, check if the church food bank was open. She had a plan. She always had a plan. The gas station was nearly empty. Just a tired-looking beta clerk, restocking cigarettes behind bulletproof glass. Lee held both twins' hands as they studied the rotating hot food case like it held the secrets of the universe. "Donuts, donuts, donuts," Emma chanted. Lee grabbed 3 packages, then added a small carton of milk, $4.27. She had enough, barely. At the register she counted out bills and coins with fingers that wanted to shake. The clerk didn't meet her eyes, nobody wanted to see poverty up close. It was too uncomfortable, too real, too that could be me. Back at the car, She divided the donuts, while the twins sat on the curb, legs swinging. 6 donuts. 2 each for breakfast. 2 she'd save for later. Aren't you eating, Mama? Emma's eyes, Robbie's eyes, studied her with that unnerving perception children sometimes have. I ate while you were sleeping, baby. These are all for you growing warriors. Daddy used to call us that, Ethan said quietly. His little warriors. Lee's throat closed. He did. And you are. You're the bravest, strongest little warriors I know. She watched them eat, memorizing this moment. Tomorrow she'd figure out the next steps. Tomorrow she'd find a shelter, a job, something. Tonight they'd sleep in the car again, and she'd pretend it was fine, and maybe if she pretended hard enough, they'd believe it. The sun crept higher, painting the parking lot in shades of amber and gold. A few more cars pulled in, early morning commuters grabbing coffee before work, living normal lives with homes and paychecks and futures. Lee looked away. Envy was a poison she couldn't afford. Then she heard it. The low rumble of an expensive engine, completely out of place in this run-down gas station on the edge of town. A black town car rolled into the parking lot, not just any car, but the kind with tinted windows and immaculate paint that cost more than Lee had earned in her entire life. It moved with predatory grace, circling once before pulling into the spot directly beside her Honda. Lee's Omega instincts flared. Danger. Unknown. Protect the young. She stood quickly, positioning herself between the twins and the vehicle. Emma and Ethan sensed her tension, scrambling behind her legs. The driver's door opened. A beta male emerged, late 40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost 3 months of her old rent. He had silver at his temples, and the kind of confident posture that came from never having worried about money a day in his life. His eyes scanned the parking lot with professional efficiency before landing on Leigh. His expression shifted, something between relief and concern. Mrs. Lee Rogers? His voice was smooth, educated, the kind of voice used to being obeyed. Every instinct screamed run. Debt collectors didn't drive cars like that, but maybe lawyers did? Maybe she'd unknowingly signed something that put her in worse trouble? I don't owe anyone money anymore, she said quickly, hating how defensive she sounded. I mean, I do, but I'm working on it. I've been trying to find work, but, ma'am. He held up one hand, his expression softening. You're not in trouble. My name is Vernon Manning. I'm a private attorney, and I've been searching for you for 3 months. 3 months. Since right after Robbie died. Searching for me? Why? Vernon glanced at the twins, then at her Honda packed with garbage bags of belongings, at the eviction notice visible through the windshield. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Rogers, you've inherited an estate. A substantial one. My client has been trying to locate you to execute the terms of the will, but you've been difficult to track. Lee's mind reeled. Estate, will? There must be a mistake. My husband didn't have anything to leave. He was a construction worker. We were barely... She stopped, pride catching the words before they could escape. I assure you, there's no mistake. Vernon pulled a leather portfolio from his car, extracting documents with official-looking seals. I need you and the children to come with me. Today. Now, if possible. Come with you where? To the estate. It's approximately 3 hours north. Everything will be explained when we arrive. This was insane. This was a scam. This was... Who left us an estate? Leigh demanded. Robbie's parents died years before we married. He had no siblings, no family. Who would? Vernon's expression grew carefully neutral. That information will be provided at the estate, Mrs. Rogers. I'm not at liberty to discuss details in a public location, but I can tell you that you and your children are in no danger. In fact, my client has been quite concerned for your welfare. Had we known your circumstances... He trailed off, something like anger flashing in his eyes before he controlled it. If this is real, why now? Why not reach out when Robbie died? We tried. The address we had was incorrect, the phone number disconnected. By the time we located your previous residence, you'd been evicted. I've been checking every shelter, every assistance office, He stopped himself. Mrs. Rogers, I understand this is overwhelming, but I need you to trust me. Your husband had connections you weren't aware of, people who cared about him, people who care about you and your children. Lee looked at her twins, still clutching her legs. looking up at her with those wide, trusting eyes. She looked at her car packed with everything they owned. She looked at her phone, silent now, because she'd turned it off to avoid the debt collectors. She looked at the $4 in her pocket, at the donuts she'd saved for later, at the future that stretched ahead like a black pit. What did she have to lose? They were already at rock bottom. If this was a scam, at least they'd get a 3-hour car ride in a vehicle with working heat. If it was real, she didn't let herself hope. Hope was dangerous. "We'll come," she said quietly. "But if this is some kind of—" "It's not." Vernon's expression gentled. "Mrs. Rogers, your life is about to change. I realize that's difficult to believe right now, but I promise you, by sunset today, your children will sleep in beds, in a home, safe." Tears threatened, hot and humiliating behind her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "Okay, we'll take my car." "Your vehicle." He eyed the Honda diplomatically. "We can arrange for it to be transported to the estate." 20 minutes later, Lay sat in the back of the town car with a twin on each side, watching her old life disappear in the rearview mirror. The leather seats were butter soft. Climate control kept the temperature perfect. Emma and Ethan were already drowsing, exhausted from their restless night. Vernon drove in professional silence, occasionally glancing at her in the mirror with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Mr. Manning," Lay finally asked, voice low to avoid waking the twins. "Who was Robbie Carney to the person who left us this estate?" Vernon's hands tightened briefly on the steering wheel. "Your husband was many things, Mrs. Rogers. A construction worker was only one of them." Ice slid down her spine. "What does that mean?" "It means," Vernon said carefully, "that the man you knew loved you very much, and the man you didn't know died protecting something worth more than his life." Before Lay could process that, before she could demand real answers, Vernon added almost too quietly, "The Alpha King has been waiting for you." The world tilted. Alpha King. There was only one Alpha King in the Northern Territories, the most powerful Alpha in their region, commander of packs spanning 5 states, a man whose name was spoken with reverence and fear. What could her Robbie, sweet, gentle Robbie who fixed her coffee every morning and sang off-key lullabies to their babies, what could he possibly have to do with royalty? Lee looked down at her twins, peaceful in sleep, and wondered what secrets their father had died protecting, and whether those secrets were about to get them all killed. Chapter 2. The Hidden Estate. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, cutting through dense pine forests that grew thicker the further north they traveled. Lee watched the landscape transform from suburban sprawl to rural farmland to wilderness that seemed untouched by human hands. They'd left civilization behind an hour ago. Emma and Ethan had woken briefly, accepted juice boxes and crackers that Vernon produced from a cooler. Of course, he'd come prepared, and drifted back to sleep. The emotional exhaustion of the past months had caught up with them. Lay envied their ability to simply surrender to rest. She couldn't stop her mind from racing. Alpha King. The words circled like vultures. Douglas Hammond, that was his name, though most people just called him His Majesty or the King. Lay had never seen him in person. People like her didn't move in circles anywhere near that stratospheric level of power, but she'd heard the stories everyone heard. Douglas Hammond had united the fractured northern packs 15 years ago after a brutal territory war. He was ruthless in politics, fierce in protection of his people, and reportedly unmated despite being in his late 30s, a rarity for an alpha of his standing. Some said he was too damaged by the wars to bond. Others whispered he was waiting for a true mate that might never come. What would a man like that want with a broke Omega widow and her babies? "Mr. Manning," Lay said, unable to bear the silence any longer. "I need you to tell me something. Anything. Because my mind is creating scenarios that are scaring me." Vernon's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. For a long moment, he seemed to debate with himself. Then he sighed. "What do you know about your husband's work history before you met?" Lee frowned. "He worked construction. He told me he'd been doing it since he aged out of foster care at 18. He never went to college. Learned the trade on the job. And you believed that?" The question stung. "Why wouldn't I? Robbie never lied to me, didn't he?" Vernon's tone was gentle but pointed. "Mrs. Rogers, your husband was many things, but a lifelong construction worker wasn't one of them. Did you ever wonder why a man with his skills, his intelligence, never advanced beyond basic labor? Why he never pursued foreman positions, better pay, benefits?" Lee's chest tightened. She had wondered, actually, Robbie was brilliant. He could calculate complex structural equations in his head, spoke 3 languages fluently, read voraciously. She'd always assumed he'd been held back by his lack of formal education, by systemic barriers that kept foster kids trapped in low-wage cycles. What was he really? She whispered. Before construction? He was special forces, black ops, the kind of work that doesn't exist on paper. Vernon paused. He served with Douglas Hammond for 12 years. They were pack brothers not by blood but by bond, the kind of bond that's forged when men trust each other with their lives repeatedly. Lee felt like she'd been punched. That's not possible. Robbie was alpha? Yes. But his scent was so mild, I assumed he was beta. And when I went into heat the first time we were together, she stopped, heat flooding her cheeks. This wasn't appropriate conversation. Vernon's expression softened. He was on suppressants. Heavy ones. Alpha suppressants are rare and expensive, but effective. He was hiding what he was. Why? The word came out broken. Why would he hide that from me? To protect you. Vernon took an exit onto a road that wasn't marked on any map, just a smooth ribbon of asphalt cutting through pristine forest. The life he left behind was dangerous. Mrs. Rogers. The enemies he made during his service, they're the kind who use leverage. Family, loved ones. By becoming someone else, by erasing his past, he thought he could give you a normal life. He thought wrong. Bitterness leaked into Lay's voice. Because he's dead. And I don't even know why. And apparently everything about our life together was a lie. Not everything, Vernon said quietly. His love for you was real. I know that because I saw it. 3 years ago, at the Alpha Summit, Robbie snuck into the king's private quarters at 2 a.m., woke him up, said he needed advice, then spent 4 hours showing His Majesty pictures on his phone. You at the farmer's market, you pregnant with the twins, you laughing at something off camera. He talked about you like other men talk about breathing. Essential, necessary, the only thing that mattered. Tears burned Lee's eyes. She remembered that weekend. Robbie had said he needed to travel for a construction job in the city. He'd called her every night, told her he missed her, made her promise to take care of herself and his warriors. He'd been with the Alpha King, his old pack brother, living a completely separate life. If Douglas Hammond cared about Robbie so much, why didn't he come to the funeral? Vernon's jaw clenched. He did. You didn't see him. He stayed at the back, left, before anyone could recognize him. Royal presence draws attention, and attention was the last thing you needed. But he was there. And when he realized Robbie hadn't made financial provisions for you, that you'd been left with nothing, Vernon shook his head. I've worked for His Majesty for 20 years. I've never seen him that angry. The car slowed, approaching massive iron gates that seemed to materialize from the forest itself. Cameras mounted on stone pillars tracked their approach. Vernon pressed a button on the dashboard, and the gates swung open with silent, expensive precision. We're here, Vernon announced. The driveway alone was longer than the street Lee used to live on. Ancient oaks lined the paved road, their branches creating a cathedral ceiling overhead. Then the trees opened up, and Lee's breath caught. The estate sprawled across manicured grounds like something from a period drama. The main house was massive, 3 stories of stone and timber, with wings extending on either side like welcoming arms. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the afternoon sun. Gardens meticulously maintained surrounded a fountain that probably cost more than her entire childhood home. This wasn't a house. This was a monument to wealth and power. This can't be real, Lee whispered. You're telling me this belongs to us? To me? To you and the children, yes. The deed was transferred into your name 6 months ago, immediately following your husband's death. We've been maintaining it, waiting for you. The twins stirred as Vernon pulled up to the front entrance. Emma's eyes went wide as saucers. Mama, is that a castle? It's not a castle, sweetie. What was it? A mansion? An estate? A dream that couldn't possibly be real? It's home, Vernon supplied, coming around to open their door. If you'll allow it to be. Lee climbed out on shaking legs, lifting Ethan, while Emma scrambled out on her own. The twins stared at the house with identical expressions of wonder. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman in her 50s emerged. Clearly staff, dressed in neat slacks and a cardigan, her graying hair pulled into a practical bun. But her smile was warm. genuine. Mrs. Rogers. Thank goodness. We've been so worried. She had the slightest hint of an Irish accent. I'm Patrika Bowman, the house manager. Please come in. You all must be exhausted. The foyer alone was larger than Lee's entire apartment had been. Marble floors, a staircase that curved upward like something from a romance novel, artwork on the walls that was probably worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Everything gleamed with the kind of cleanliness that came from professional care. Emma and Ethan stood frozen, overwhelmed. Then Ethan whispered, "Can we touch things?" Patrika laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "You can touch everything, sweetheart. This is your house, your home. Come, let me show you to your rooms, yes, plural. You each get your own room, with toys and books and—" "Our own rooms?" Emma breathed. They'd been sharing a bedroom their entire lives, crammed into a space barely big enough for their twin beds. "Unless you'd prefer to share?" Patrika looked to Lee for guidance. "Whatever they want," Lee managed. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears, like she was speaking from underwater. Vernon touched her elbow gently. "Mrs. Rogers, why don't you let Patrika get the children settled while we discuss some details?" Leigh wanted to refuse. Wanted to keep her babies close, not trust them to strangers in this strange place. But Emma and Ethan were already following Patrika up the stairs, chattering excitedly. And maybe they needed this, a moment of pure childhood joy not tainted by their mother's fear. "Okay," she whispered. Vernon led her to a study off the main hall. The room was quintessentially masculine leather furniture, dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A massive desk dominated one wall, and above the fireplace, Lee's knees buckled. Vernon caught her, guided her to a chair. But she couldn't stop staring at the photograph in the ornate frame. Robbie. Her Robbie, but not. He wore military dress uniform, medals glinting on his chest, his hair shorter than she'd ever seen it. And beside him, an arm around his shoulders, stood a man who could only be Douglas Hammond. The Alpha King was devastatingly handsome in that dangerous way some alphas were: dark hair, sharp features, eyes that seemed to see through the camera into the soul. He was laughing at something off camera, his head tilted toward Robbie, and the affection between them was palpable even through the photograph. They looked like brothers. Like family. "When was this taken?" Lee's voice cracked. 15 years ago. After their last official mission together. Vernon pulled files from his briefcase. "Mrs. Rogers, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. I'm only sharing it because His Majesty believes you have a right to know, and because what's in this house makes you a target whether you know the truth or not." Lee tore her eyes from the photograph. "What do you mean, target?" Vernon opened a file. Inside were documents, photographs, newspaper clippings. "Your husband didn't die in a construction accident. He was murdered. Made to look like an accident, but the investigation, the real investigation, not the public one, proved it was sabotage." The world tilted again. Lee gripped the chair arms to keep from falling. "Murdered? Why?" "Because of what he knew. What he documented during his years in service." Vernon's expression was grim. "Robbie discovered evidence of corruption within the Council of Alphas, the governing body that's supposed to oversee territorial disputes and pack law. Trafficking, territory manipulation, war profiteering. Crimes that would bring down some of the most powerful alphas in the country. And he kept this evidence? Here? Yes. In a secure location in this house. His plan was to expose them, but he needed time to gather more proof, build an airtight case. They discovered what he was doing, and eliminated him before he could go public. Lee felt sick. So they'll come for us, for whatever he hid. His Majesty doesn't believe so. As far as the council knows, Robbie was simply a construction worker. They don't know about you. About this estate. Everything was buried under shell corporations and falsified records. You're safe here, but you found me. I had resources they don't. And a very motivated employer." Vernon pulled out another document. A deed with her name on it. "This estate is yours, free and clear. No mortgage. No liens. The property taxes are paid through a trust for the next 50 years. There's also a financial account in your name." "How much?" Lee interrupted. Vernon hesitated. "Enough that you'll never worry about money again. Enough that your children can attend the best schools, receive the best care. Enough that you're independent and secure," which meant millions. Had to be millions. "I don't understand." If Robbie had this kind of money, why were we struggling? Why was I working 2 jobs while pregnant? Why? Her voice broke. Because accessing it would have revealed his identity. The money was always meant for after, for when his mission was complete and you could live openly as his family. He was going to tell you everything once the council members were arrested. He just ran out of time. Lei pressed her hands to her face. Too much. This was all too much. A scent drifted into the room, then something that made her omega instincts surge. Pine and snow, leather and something darker, wilder. Alpha. Powerful alpha. Her suppressant-deprived body responded immediately. Awareness prickling across her skin. Vernon stood. He's early. Who's? The study door opened. Douglas Hammond filled the doorway. And there was no other word for it. His presence was overwhelming. His alpha aura barely contained. He was taller than the photograph suggested, broader through the shoulders, and his eyes. Those ice-blue eyes locked onto Lei, with an intensity that made her want to submit and flee in equal measure. He wore jeans and a simple black shirt, clearly trying to appear casual, but nothing could diminish the raw power that emanated from him. This was a man accustomed to command, to instant obedience, to being the most dominant presence in any room. "Mrs. Rogers," he said, and his voice was like whiskey and smoke, sending shivers down her spine. "I've been looking for you for a very long time." Emma and Ethan chose that moment to come barreling into the study, Patricia following apologetically behind them. They skidded to a stop, staring up at the massive alpha. Ethan's small voice broke the silence. "Mommy, this place smells like Daddy." Douglas Hammond's eyes widened fractionally. Then he crouched down to the twins' level, a gesture of deliberate non-threat, and smiled. "Hello, little warriors. Your father told me all about you." And Lei, watching the Alpha King gentle himself for her children, watching her twins gravitate toward him with the instinctive trust that pups showed to safe alphas, felt her carefully controlled world crack open. Whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same. Vernon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went rigid. "Your Majesty, we have a breach. Eastern perimeter. 4 vehicles. Heavily armed." Douglas rose smoothly, his entire demeanor shifting from gentle to lethal in a heartbeat. "How long? 7 minutes? Maybe less." The Alpha King looked at Lei, at her twins, and his eyes flashed with something primal and protective. "Get them to the safe room. Now." His voice carried alpha command impossible to disobey, wired directly into the hindbrain. Lei scooped up both twins despite Ethan's weight. "What's happening?" Douglas was already moving, pulling a phone from his pocket, issuing rapid orders. "Someone knows you're here, and they're coming to finish what they started." Chapter 3. The Alpha King's Truth. Patricia moved with surprising speed for a woman her age, leading Lei and the twins down a hallway Lei hadn't noticed before. Behind them, Douglas barked commands into his phone, terse, military-efficient orders that spoke of a man who'd done this before. "Stay calm for the children," Patricia murmured as they descended a hidden staircase behind what had appeared to be a solid wall. "His Majesty has the best security team in the territories. We'll be safe." Emma whimpered against Lei's shoulder. Ethan had gone silent, his small body rigid with fear. 4 years old was old enough to understand danger, young enough to be terrified by it. "It's okay, babies," Lei whispered, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "We're just playing a game, like hide and seek." "I don't like this game," Emma said, her voice small. The safe room was nothing like Lei expected. She'd imagined something sterile and cold, concrete walls, harsh lighting. Instead, they entered a space that looked like a luxury basement apartment. Soft carpet, comfortable furniture, a kitchenette stocked with supplies. One wall was dominated by monitors showing different angles of the estate grounds. On those monitors, Lei could see armed figures moving through the forest. Douglas entered behind them, followed by 3 men in tactical gear. He moved directly to the monitors, his jaw tight as he assessed the situation. "Vernon, take the north team. Julio, you're with me on the south approach. Luther, I want eyes on the road, make sure this is their only wave." His commands were crisp, confident. "Your Majesty," Vernon began, "perhaps you should remain in the safe room with—" "I don't hide while my people fight." Douglas's tone left no room for argument. Then his expression softened fractionally as he turned to Lei. "You're safe here. These walls could withstand a missile strike. The door seals from the inside once I leave. Engage the lock. Don't open it for anyone except Vernon or myself. Understand? Lee nodded, clutching her twins tighter. Who are they? Why are they here? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Douglas crouched down again, his attention shifting to Emma and Ethan. His voice dropped to something gentle, almost tender. Hey, little warriors. You remember what your dad used to tell you about being brave? Ethan nodded slowly. He said being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you are scared. Smart man, your father. Douglas's expression flickered with grief so raw it made Lee's chest ache. I need you both to be brave right now. Stay with your mom. Keep her safe for me. Can you do that? We can be brave. Emma whispered. I know you can. You're Robbie Carney's children. Bravery is in your blood. Douglas stood, his eyes meeting Leigh's. For a moment, the Alpha King's mask slipped, and she saw the man beneath exhausted, grieving, worried. I will protect you. All of you. I swear it. Then he was gone. The heavy door sealing shut behind him with a hiss of pressurized air. Lee engaged the lock with shaking fingers, then sank onto the couch with a twin on each side. On the monitors, she watched Douglas and his team spread out across the grounds with military precision. Mama, is that man going to fight the bad people? Ethan asked. Yes, baby. Is he strong like Daddy was? Lee thought about the raw power she'd sensed from Douglas Hammond, the barely contained violence in his controlled movements. Yes. He's very strong. Good. Emma said decisively. Then we'll be okay. If only Leigh had her daughter's faith. On the monitors, the attackers breached the perimeter. There were at least a dozen professionals by the look of them, moving in coordinated formation. They wore no identifying marks, carried military-grade weapons. This wasn't some random robbery. This was an execution team. Douglas's security met them at the first checkpoint. Even through the silent video feed, Lee could see the Alpha King was a force of nature in combat. He moved like violence, personified, efficient, brutal, terrifying. Men went down before they could raise their weapons, but there were so many of them. Lee covered the twins' eyes when the fighting got too graphic, though she couldn't look away herself. This was her fault. Her presence here had brought this danger. If Douglas died protecting them, if any of his people were hurt because she'd accepted this estate, this money, this impossible new life. Mrs. Rogers. Patrika's calm voice cut through her spiraling panic. Look at me, dear. Lee tore her eyes from the monitors. This isn't your fault, Patrika said firmly, as if reading her mind. These people, whoever sent them, they're the villains in this story. You're just a mother trying to protect her children. There's no shame in that, no guilt. People are dying because of me. People are dying because evil men make evil choices. His Majesty chose to bring you here. He chose to protect you. Those are his choices, made with full knowledge of the risks. Patrika handed her a bottle of water. Now, drink. Breathe. Your children need you steady. Lee drank, forced air into her lungs. On the monitors, the fight was turning. Douglas's team had superior training, better positioning. The attackers were retreating, falling back toward their vehicles. Then Douglas did something that made Leigh's blood run cold. He pursued one of the retreating men, caught him, and dragged him back toward the house alive, struggling, clearly meant for interrogation. 20 minutes later, the all-clear signal came. Vernon's voice through the intercom. Mrs. Rogers, it's safe to open the door. Lee hesitated. The twins had fallen into exhausted sleep against her, the adrenaline crash claiming them. She didn't want to move, didn't want to face whatever came next. But the lock disengaged, and Vernon entered, his suit somehow still immaculate despite whatever he'd been doing outside. His Majesty requests your presence in the study. The children can remain here with Patrika. I'm not leaving them. They'll be safer here than anywhere else in the world, Vernon interrupted gently. And what His Majesty needs to discuss with you isn't appropriate for young ears. Lee looked at her sleeping twins, at Patrika's kind, reliable face. Every instinct screamed to keep them close. But Vernon was right, they didn't need to see or hear whatever horrors awaited in that study. If anything happens, nothing will happen to them. You have my word. Vernon's tone was ironclad. Lee carefully extracted herself from the couch, kissed each twin's forehead, and followed Vernon up the stairs. The estate was eerily quiet after the violence. Staff moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning up evidence of the attack with the kind of expertise that suggested this wasn't their first time. Lee tried not to look too closely at the dark stains being scrubbed from the marble floors. In the study, Douglas stood by the fireplace, his back to the door. He'd changed clothes, the shirt he'd worn was gone, replaced by a clean black t-shirt that did nothing to hide the muscled lines of his body. His hands were raw-knuckled, freshly washed but bruised. He turned when she entered, and Lee saw the predator beneath the king. His alpha presence was barely leashed, filling the room with crackling tension. "Sit," he said, then seemed to catch himself. "Please. Sit down, Lei." The use of her first name sent a flutter through her stomach. She sat, perched on the edge of the leather chair, hands clasped in her lap. Douglas poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter whiskey, by the smell, and downed it in one swallow. Then he poured another and brought it to her. "Drink. You look like you need it." She did. The burn was steadying, grounding. Who were they? Mercenaries. Hired guns. Douglas moved to the desk, pulled out a tablet, and brought it to her. On the screen was a photo of a man late 50s, alpha by the arrogant set of his jaw. This man hired them. His name is Kent Sweeney. He sits on the Council of Alphas. The whiskey curdled in Leah's stomach. "One of the people Robbie was investigating." "Yes. And apparently someone told him you were here. Which means we have a leak in my security team. Or someone's been watching this estate." Douglas's expression was thunderous. "I'm handling it. How many people died tonight?" "3 of the attackers. None of mine, some injuries, but everyone will survive." "And the man you captured?" Douglas's smile was cold. "He's providing information. Reluctantly, but effectively." Lee didn't want to know what methods the Alpha King used to extract reluctant information. She had a horrifying suspicion she already knew. "What happens now?" "Now we make a choice." Douglas sat in the chair across from her, close enough that his scent wrapped around her pine and snow, alpha and safety. "Kent Sweeney knows you're here. That means others on the council will know soon. They'll send more people, better equipped, and they won't stop until they have what Robbie hid or you're dead. Then I'll leave. I'll take the twins and disappear." "Where?" Douglas interrupted, his voice sharp. "How? They found you here, in one of the most secure locations in the Northern Territories, within hours of your arrival. You think you can hide from them with 2 small children and no resources? I can't stay here and put you in danger. I'm already in danger. I've been in danger since the day I helped Robbie gather evidence against the council. The only question is whether I'm protecting you while that danger plays out, or whether I'm burying another person I care about." The words hung in the air. "Another person I care about. You don't know me," Lei whispered. "I know you're Robbie's widow. I know you're the mother of his children. That's enough." Douglas leaned forward, elbows on his knees, those intense blue eyes locked on hers. "But if you want the whole truth, I'll give it to you. 3 years ago, Robbie came to me with pictures of a woman who made him happier than I'd ever seen him. He talked about you for hours, your laugh, your strength, the way you'd built a family with him despite having nothing. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd find you, protect you, make sure his children knew he loved them." Tears burned Lei's eyes. "He knew something might happen? Men like us always know. We live with death as a constant companion." Douglas's voice roughened. "But Robbie was willing to risk it because what he was doing, exposing the council's corruption, would make the world safer for his children. For all children. He died for that. And I'll be damned if I let his sacrifice be for nothing." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we go public. We release everything Robbie collected, every file, every recording, every piece of evidence. We call an emergency Alpha Summit and force the council to answer for their crimes in front of the entire supernatural community. That will make us targets. We're already targets. This way, at least we control the narrative. And I can protect you better when you're beside me than when you're running scared." Lee tried to process it. Everything had happened so fast, from sleeping in her car to sitting in a mansion, from thinking her husband was a construction worker to learning he was a spy, from believing she was alone to discovering an Alpha King wanted to shield her with his power. "I need to think about it," she managed. "You have until morning." Douglas stood, and Lee realized how close they were, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that her Omega instincts were screaming about the unmated Alpha in her space. Her suppressants were completely gone now. She could feel the heat building at the base of her spine, the biological imperative that would consume her in days, maybe hours. Her body recognized Douglas as a potential mate, powerful, protective, genetically ideal. The scent compatibility alone was making her dizzy. She saw the moment Douglas noticed. His pupils dilated, his nostrils flaring slightly as he scented her impending heat. "You need suppressants," he said, voice gone rough. "I'll have them delivered within the hour. I can't afford. It's not a question of cost. You're under my protection now. That includes medical care." He stepped back deliberately, putting distance between them. "Vernon will show you to your room. It's in the family wing, close to the twins. You'll have privacy, security, everything you need." "Douglas, don't." The word was sharp. He closed his eyes, jaw clenched. "Don't thank me. Don't look at me like that. Just go rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." Lee stood on shaking legs. As she reached the door, Douglas's voice stopped her. "Lee." She turned. His eyes were haunted, vulnerable in a way she suspected he rarely allowed. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For not finding you sooner. For the danger I've brought to your door. For not being able to save Robbie before." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry." And Lee understood then. This powerful alpha king wasn't just protecting her out of obligation. He was drowning in guilt, in grief for his pack brother, in the crushing weight of promises he hadn't been able to keep. "It's not your fault," she said softly. "None of this is your fault. Tell that to Robbie's children. They need protecting, not your guilt." Lee surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "If you want to honor Robbie's memory, be here, be present. Help me keep them safe." That's what he'd want. Douglas stared at her for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Lee left him there, standing alone in a study full of ghosts. Vernon led her to a suite that was bigger than her old apartment. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, piled with pillows that looked like clouds. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking the estate grounds. The attached bathroom had a tub large enough to swim in. "The twins are in the adjoining rooms," Vernon explained, pointing to doors on either side. "You can open the connecting doors if you prefer them close. Patricia already moved them, they didn't wake." "Thank you," Lee whispered. "Mrs. Rogers." Vernon's expression gentled. "His Majesty is a good man. The best I've known. Whatever happens next, trust that he'll do everything in his power to keep you and your children safe. Even at the cost of his own safety. Especially then. That's what makes him a king." After Vernon left, Lee opened the connecting doors. Emma and Ethan slept in matching beds piled with stuffed animals, their faces peaceful. She stood in each doorway for long minutes, watching them breathe, thanking whatever gods were listening that they were safe. Then she returned to her own room, stripped off clothes that smelled like fear and gas station parking lots, and stood under the shower spray until the water ran cold. When she emerged, a package waited on her bed. Medical-grade suppressants, the expensive kind she'd never been able to afford, along with a note in Vernon's precise handwriting. "Take 2 now, 2 every 12 hours, His Majesty's orders." Lee swallowed the pills. Felt the chemical dampening start to ease the heat building in her system. It wouldn't stop the cycle, nothing could once it started, but it would buy her time. Control. Dignity. She crawled between sheets that probably cost more than her car, and closed her eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept circling back to Douglas Hammond, the grief in his eyes, the barely controlled violence in his movements, the way he'd gentled himself for her children, the way his scent had made her omega instincts sing with recognition, with want, with a hunger that felt like betrayal. Robbie had been dead for 6 months. She'd loved him desperately. Still loved him. How could she be attracted to another alpha, especially one who'd known her husband, who carried the same guilt and grief she did? "If Dominic is with you, trust him," Robbie's letter had said in the template story. But there was no letter here. No blessing from beyond the grave. Just a widow, an alpha king, and secrets that had already cost one life. Lee pressed her hand to her mouth, muffling the sob that wanted to escape. Tomorrow she'd be strong. Tomorrow she'd make decisions that would shape her children's future. Tomorrow she'd be the fierce mother who could stand beside an alpha king and expose corruption that spanned territories. Tonight, she'd grieve. For the husband who'd lied to protect her. For the normal life that had been an illusion. For the innocence her children had lost. And for the dangerous, impossible attraction growing in her chest for a man she'd known less than a day. a man who might be the only thing standing between her family and death. Chapter 4. The first attack's aftermath. Lee woke to sunlight streaming through gauze curtains and the sound of children's laughter. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was still in the gas station parking lot, that everything the estate, Douglas Hammond, the attack had been a fever dream born of desperation. Then she registered the silk sheets beneath her fingers, the absence of cramped muscles from sleeping in a car, and reality crashed back. She bolted upright, heart hammering. The twins. Where were? Their laughter came again, closer now. Lee threw on the robe she found hanging in the enormous closet and rushed to Emma's room. Empty. Ethan's room also empty, beds already made with military precision. Panic clawed at her throat. She ran into the hallway, barefoot on plush carpet, following the sound of voices to the formal dining room, where Emma and Ethan sat at a table that could seat 20, swinging their legs and attacking plates piled with pancakes, eggs, and bacon. Patrika hovered nearby with a coffee pot, smiling indulgently. And at the head of the table, dressed in worn jeans and a navy Henley that stretched across his shoulders, sat Douglas Hammond. The Alpha King was teaching her 4-year-old son how to properly hold a fork. You see, young warrior, the key is balance, Douglas was saying, his deep voice gentle. Too tight and you tire your hand. Too loose and you lose control. Like this. Ethan mimicked Douglas's grip with intense concentration. Like this? Perfect. Now you try cutting. Douglas guided Ethan's small hands through the motion of cutting a pancake. There. A warrior who can feed himself is a warrior who can survive anywhere. Emma, not to be left out, piped up. Uncle Douglas, can you teach me to fight bad guys? Lee's breath caught. Uncle Douglas. When had that happened? Douglas's expression softened impossibly further. Fighting is a last resort, little warrior. But I can teach you to be strong, to be smart, to protect yourself and those you love. Would you like that? Both twins nodded enthusiastically. Then we'll start after breakfast. But first, Douglas looked up, those ice blue eyes finding Lee in the doorway. Something heated flickered in his gaze before he controlled it. Good morning. I hope we didn't wake you. Mama! Emma launched herself from her chair, running to Lee with sticky syrup hands. We have our own rooms. And Uncle Douglas made pancakes and there's a gym and a library and Patrika says we can have a dog if you say yes and breathe, baby. Lee laughed, catching her daughter up. Her eyes met Douglas's over Emma's head. Uncle Douglas? A faint flush colored the Alpha King's cheeks. They asked what to call me. Your Majesty seemed too formal for children. I hope you don't mind. Mind? Her children were eating homemade pancakes with an Alpha King who'd killed men to protect them 12 hours ago. Her entire life had become surreal. It's fine, she managed. Thank you for watching them. I didn't mean to sleep so late. It's barely 8, Douglas said. And you needed rest. Patrika, please bring Mrs. Rogers some coffee and breakfast. Already on it, Your Majesty. Lee settled into a chair not too close to Douglas, but close enough that his scent wrapped around her even through the suppressants, pine and snow, power and protection. Her Omega hindbrain cataloged him as safe alpha provider, which was dangerous and inappropriate and she needed to stop. Ethan climbed down from his chair and approached her solemnly. Mama, Uncle Douglas says Daddy was a hero. A real hero who fought bad guys and saved people. Lee's throat closed. She looked at Douglas, who met her gaze steadily. That's true, she whispered. Your daddy was the bravest man I ever knew. Was he braver than Uncle Douglas? Emma asked, with the brutal honesty of 4-year-olds. Douglas chuckled, a sound like distant thunder. Your father was braver than anyone, Emma. He did things that terrified him because they were right. That's true courage. But you're brave too, Ethan insisted. You fought the bad guys last night. We saw on the TV screens before we fell asleep. Lee's eyes widened. You saw? Just briefly, Patrika interjected quickly. They woke up, asked for you. I showed them the monitors to prove you were safe, and His Majesty was handling the situation. They saw maybe 30 seconds before I distracted them with hot chocolate. 30 seconds of Douglas Hammond in combat mode was probably enough to give her nightmares, let alone her children. But when Lee looked at the twins, they seemed fine. More than fine. They looked at Douglas with something close to worship, because he'd protected them. Protected her. and children understood that kind of devotion instinctively. Breakfast continued with surprising normalcy. Douglas asked the twins about their favorite subjects. Emma loved art. Ethan was obsessed with dinosaurs. He promised Emma they'd paint together later, told Ethan there was a natural history museum an hour away they could visit once things settled down. He spoke to them like people, not infants. Listened when they talked, remembered details. It was so achingly familiar. Robbie had been the same way, treating their children as small humans worthy of respect and attention. The comparison made Lay's chest hurt. After breakfast, Douglas excused himself alpha business unfortunately, and Vernon appeared to take his place. The lawyer produced tablets loaded with educational games, and the twins settled in the library under Patrika's watchful eye. Vernon guided Lee back to the study where everything had changed last night. "We need to discuss your situation," he said without preamble. "His Majesty has been strategizing since 3 this morning. He has a plan, but it requires your cooperation and consent." "What kind of plan?" Vernon pulled up documents on the tablet. "First, your financial situation. As I mentioned yesterday, there's an account in your name. The total is $12 million. Lee's vision swam. $12 million. That's not possible. It's very possible. This money came from various sources: Robbie's military back pay, investments he made during his service, compensation from His Majesty for work Robbie did after officially leaving Special Forces. It's yours, legally and morally. The IRS has been notified, taxes paid, it's clean money. $12 million. Her children would never be hungry again, never sleep in a car, never know the gnawing fear of poverty. What's the catch?" Vernon's expression turned grave. "The catch is that Kent Sweeney and his council allies know you exist now. They know you're under His Majesty's protection. They'll use every resource at their disposal to either kill you or force you to turn over Robbie's evidence. So what's Douglas's plan? Go on the offensive. Tomorrow night, there's a scheduled council meeting. All 12 members will be present. His Majesty wants to attend and publicly accuse Kent Sweeney of murder, corruption, and treason. With you as witness." Lee's stomach dropped. "Me? In front of the council? Vernon, I'm Omega. I'm nobody. They'll never. You're Robbie Carney's widow. You're the legal owner of evidence that can destroy them. And you'll be presented as under the Alpha King's personal protection." Vernon's voice softened. "I won't lie to you, Mrs. Rogers. This will be dangerous. The council doesn't react well to public accusations. But His Majesty believes it's the only way to force their hand before they can organize another attack. What if they just kill us all at the meeting? They won't. The meeting is held on neutral ground, attended by representatives from every major pack in the territory. Breaking neutrality law would mean war with every pack simultaneously. Even the council isn't that stupid." Lee pressed her fingers to her temples. 24 hours ago, her biggest worry was where her next meal would come from. Now she was supposed to stand in front of the most powerful alphas in the country and accuse them of murder? "I need to see the evidence," she said. "If I'm going to do this, I need to understand what Robbie died for." Vernon nodded. "His Majesty anticipated that. He's waiting in the basement archives. If you're ready." Was she ready to see proof of her husband's secret life, the corruption he'd fought, the danger he'd deliberately walked into? No. But she'd do it anyway. The basement archives were nothing like the safe room. This was utilitarian concrete walls, industrial lighting, server racks humming with stored data. Douglas stood before a massive monitor wall, studying documents with the intensity of a man preparing for war. He turned when they entered. "Lee, are you sure you want to see this?" "I need to." Douglas nodded slowly. He pressed a button, and the monitors lit up with files, photographs, documents, audio recordings. Years of carefully gathered evidence. "Robbie started investigating the council 8 years ago," Douglas began, his voice taking on a lecturing quality. "He noticed discrepancies in territory transfer records, land that should have gone to smaller packs, mysteriously ending up in council members' holdings. He brought it to me, and we started digging deeper. The first image showed a young Omega woman, maybe 16, with hollow eyes. This is Yesenia Nicholson. She was taken from her family at 14, sold to an alpha in Kent Sweeney's pack. Robbie found 12 others like her, all disappeared from official records, all trafficked through council-controlled territories." Lee felt sick. "They're selling children? Children, vulnerable Omegas, anyone without PAC protection. The council provides cover, falsifies documentation, and takes a cut of the profits. Douglas's jaw clenched. Robbie went undercover in 3 different operations, gathered testimony from survivors, traced money through shell corporations. He built a case that's absolutely airtight. More images flickered past. Financial records showing millions in illegal transactions. Audio recordings of council members discussing merchandise and shipments in code that wasn't really code at all. Video of transfers happening in parking lots, warehouses, places designed to avoid scrutiny. This one, Douglas said, pulling up a specific file, is what got Robbie killed. The image showed Kent Sweeney meeting with a man in military uniform. The date stamp was 6 months and 3 weeks ago, less than a week before Robbie died. That's Colonel Oscar Fox, head of supernatural military operations. Robbie caught them discussing a weapons deal, council buying military-grade arms off the books, planning to arm their private enforcers. It would have given them enough firepower to challenge PAC law, maybe even challenge me. Douglas's voice went cold. When Robbie told me about this meeting, I ordered him to pull back. I said we had enough. We could move forward with prosecution, but he wanted one more piece proof that the weapons shipment actually arrived. He went to the construction site where they were supposed to be stored, disguised as a worker. Lee knew where this was going. Her hands started shaking. They were waiting for him. Someone tipped them off, we never figured out who. They sabotaged the crane he was working under, made it look like an accident. By the time my people arrived, Douglas's voice cracked. I'm sorry, Lee. I should have ordered him to stop sooner. I should have. Stop. Lee's voice was firmer than she felt. Stop blaming yourself. Robbie made his own choices. He knew the risks. He had a family. He should have. He was fighting to make the world safer for his family, for all families. Lee moved closer to the monitors, studying the evidence with new eyes. How many people are they hurting, Douglas? How many Omegas like Yesenia? How many children? Conservative estimate, hundreds over the past decade. Maybe thousands if you count indirect victims, PACs destroyed by illegal territory seizures, families torn apart. Lee thought about her twins sleeping upstairs, about Emma's bright smile and Ethan's solemn eyes, about every parent out there who couldn't protect their children from predators with power and money. Then we finish what Robbie started, she said. We go to that council meeting, we expose every single one of them, and we make sure my husband didn't die for nothing. Douglas stared at her with something like awe. You understand they'll come after you harder after this? That your life will never be quiet or simple again? My life stopped being simple the day I counted my last $5 in a parking lot. Then it stopped being quiet when an Alpha King walked into it. Lay met his gaze steadily. I'm not brave like you or Robbie. I'm terrified. But I'm also a mother, and mothers do terrifying things when their children's futures are at stake. Something shifted in Douglas's expression, respect, admiration, and something deeper that made Lay's breath catch. The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. Vernon cleared his throat diplomatically. I'll prepare the presentation for the council meeting. Mrs. Rogers, you should be prepared for questions they'll try to discredit you as an unreliable Omega witness. Let them try, Lay said. I've been underestimated my entire life. I know how to use it. Douglas's smile was slow, predatory, proud. Robbie chose well. Those words again. They settled around Lee's heart like a blessing and a curse. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Vernon coached Lee on council protocol, proper forms of address, how to stand and speak without showing submission. Douglas insisted she tour the entire estate. You need to know every exit, every safe room, every weapon cache. The twins spent the afternoon with Patrika, who turned out to be not just a housekeeper but a trained combat medic and former intelligence officer. Of course, Douglas Hammond's staff were all secretly badass. By evening, Lee's head spun with information. The suppressants were holding, but barely. She could feel heat building beneath the chemical dam, waiting to break free. Soon. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tonight. Douglas had been careful to keep physical distance all day. No accidental touches, no lingering in doorways, nothing that might trigger her Omega instincts. It was considerate and maddening in equal measure. After the twins were tucked into bed, a process that involved 3 stories, 5 songs, and solemn promises that Uncle Douglas would be there in the morning, Lee found herself alone in her suite. A knock came at the door. Douglas, holding a thick manila envelope. The council meeting is at 8 p.m. tomorrow, he said, not entering. This contains everything you need to know about each member, their pacts, their crimes, their weaknesses. Study it tonight. Lee took the envelope. Will you be there? At the meeting. I'll be presenting the evidence. But Lei. He hesitated, and she realized this powerful alpha was nervous. They're going to say terrible things about Robbie, try to paint him as a traitor, a liar, mentally unstable. You need to be prepared for that. Let them. Lee's voice was steel. I knew Robbie better than anyone. I know what he was capable of, and what he wasn't. Their lies can't touch the truth. Douglas looked at her for a long moment. Has anyone ever told you that you're extraordinary? Heat flooded Lee's cheeks. I'm just a mother protecting her children. You're so much more than that. He reached out, stopped himself before touching her face. His hand dropped. Sleep well, Lei. Tomorrow changes everything. He left before she could respond. His scent lingering in the doorway, pine and snow, and something that called to the Omega in her with devastating intensity. Lee closed the door, pressed her forehead against the cool wood, and tried to remember why being attracted to Douglas Hammond was a terrible idea. She came up with a dozen reasons. None of them seemed to matter. When her body remembered the way he'd looked at her, like she was precious, powerful, worth protecting. Tomorrow they'd face the council. Tomorrow they'd expose corruption and demand justice. Tomorrow her life would change forever. Tonight, she'd study files on the men who killed her husband, and try not to think about the Alpha King sleeping 3 doors down, probably also awake, probably also fighting attraction that shouldn't exist. Lee opened the envelope and began to read. By dawn, she'd know everything about the council. By sunset tomorrow, they'd know what happened when you underestimated a desperate Omega mother with nothing left to lose. Chapter 5. Secrets in the Starlight. Lee didn't sleep. By 3 a.m. she'd memorized every council member's file. By 4, she'd drafted responses to every possible attack on her credibility. By 5, she was pacing her room, adrenaline and suppressants warring in her system. At 6, a soft knock interrupted her circuit of the carpet. Mrs. Rogers? Patrika's voice was gentle through the door. May I come in? Lei opened the door. The older woman carried a breakfast tray, coffee, fruit, yogurt, and a knowing expression. You didn't sleep, Patrika said. Not a question. Couldn't. His Majesty didn't either. I heard him in the gym at 2 a.m. Then in his office at 4. Patrika set the tray on the table by the window. You're both working yourselves into exhaustion before the real battle even begins. I need to be ready. You need to be present. There's a difference. Patrika poured coffee with practiced ease. Eat something. Then I'm running you a bath with lavender oil. It'll help calm your nerves without interfering with your suppressants. Lee wanted to argue, but Patrika's expression brooked no opposition. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, while the older woman moved about the suite with quiet efficiency. The bath did help. Lei sank into water hot enough to pink her skin, breathing in lavender and something else, chamomile maybe. Her muscles unclenched incrementally. Her mind, overstuffed with facts and fear, began to quiet. She was toweling off when she heard it. Children's voices, high and excited, coming from somewhere outside. Lee moved to the window. Below, in a courtyard she hadn't noticed before, Emma and Ethan were running around with wooden swords, attacking a laughing Douglas Hammond with fierce determination. He played along, dramatically dodging their attacks, occasionally scooping one up and spinning them until they shrieked with delight. He wore workout clothes, athletic pants, and a t-shirt that clung to muscles earned through actual combat, not just gym vanity. His hair was mussed, his expression unguarded in a way she'd never seen. He looked younger, happy. He looked like Robbie used to look when playing with the twins. The comparison twisted something in Lee's chest, grief and guilt and longing all tangled together. He's good with them, Patrika said, appearing beside her at the window. Natural. His Majesty never had children of his own. The wars took up too much time, and he never found a mate worth settling with. But he wanted a family. Still does, I think. Patrika. I'm not meddling, dear. Just observing. You look at him like you're afraid to want what you see. He looks at you like he's terrified to hope you might want it too. Patrika's smile was sad, understanding. 2 people drowning in guilt over happiness that hasn't even happened yet. It's too soon. Robbie's only been gone 6 months. There's no right timeline for healing. And from what I understand, your husband specifically wanted His Majesty to care for you if anything happened. That's not permission to grieve forever, it's permission to live." Before Lee could respond, Emma spotted her in the window and waved frantically. "Mama, come play. Uncle Douglas is teaching us sword fighting." Douglas looked up, his eyes finding hers across the distance. Even from here, she could see the heat in his gaze, quickly shuddered. He raised a hand in greeting, then returned his attention to the twins. "Get dressed," Patrika said. "Spend time with your children before tonight's chaos. Let yourself breathe." Lei did. She pulled on jeans and a soft sweater clothes that appeared in her closet overnight, perfectly sized, and went down to the courtyard. The morning air was crisp with approaching autumn. Emma and Ethan tackled her legs immediately, both talking over each other about Uncle Douglas's lessons and the secret technique he'd promised to teach them. "It's not very secret if you tell everyone," Douglas said dryly, but his eyes were warm. "Mama doesn't count as everyone," Ethan declared with 4-year-old logic. "She's Mama." Irrefutable point. Douglas handed Lei a wooden sword with exaggerated ceremony. "Care to spar, Mrs. Rogers? I don't know how to sword fight. Neither do our opponents tonight, but they'll attack anyway. Might as well learn the basics." His grin was boyish, transforming his usually serious face. "Unless you're afraid I'll win?" The challenge in his tone sparked something competitive in Lei's chest. "Fine. But go easy, I haven't held a weapon since. Ever. Actually." What followed was half lesson, half comedy. Douglas demonstrated basic stances, patiently correcting her grip, her footwork, her balance. The twins offered enthusiastic commentary. Lei discovered she was absolutely terrible at swordplay but stubborn enough to keep trying. At one point, Douglas stepped behind her to adjust her stance, his hands settling on her hips to guide her positioning. The contact sent electricity through her suppressant-dulled system. His breath ghosted across her ear as he murmured instructions. And she stopped hearing words, only feeling the proximity of him. Alpha. Powerful, safe. Lei. His voice had gone rough. "You're not breathing." She wasn't. She was frozen, hyper-aware of everywhere they touched, of how his scent wrapped around her stronger than ever before. Pine and snow and something darkly possessive that called to every Omega instinct she possessed. "Sorry," she managed, stepping away quickly. "I'm sorry." Douglas's jaw was tight, his eyes dark. He knew exactly what had happened. The twins, thankfully, were too busy staging their own epic duel to notice the tension crackling between the adults. "Maybe we should break for lunch," Douglas said, voice carefully controlled. Lunch was served in a sunny breakfast nook, sandwiches and fruit, milk for the twins. Emma and Ethan chattered about everything and nothing, their resilience astounding. A week ago they'd been sleeping in a car. Today they were eating cucumber sandwiches with an Alpha King and planning which books to read from the library. Children adapted. They survived. They found joy in impossible places. Halfway through the meal, Ethan went quiet. He pushed food around his plate, his small face troubled. "What's wrong, baby?" Lei asked. "I miss Daddy," Ethan whispered. "Is it bad that I like it here? That I like Uncle Douglas? Does that mean I don't love Daddy anymore?" Lei's heart cracked open. She pulled her son into her lap, breathing in his little boy scent. "Oh, sweetheart, no. Loving new people doesn't mean you stop loving the people who aren't here. Your heart just gets bigger. Daddy would want you to be happy. He'd want you to like Uncle Douglas." "How do you know?" "Because Daddy was smart, and he knew Uncle Douglas was a good man. He trusted him. We can trust him too." Ethan seemed to consider this. Then he looked at Douglas with solemn eyes. "Uncle Douglas, did you love my daddy?" The Alpha King's expression shattered and reformed. "Yes. He was my brother in all the ways that mattered. I loved him very much." "Do you miss him?" "Every day. Mama misses him too. She cries sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping." Lei flushed, but Douglas just nodded gravely. "That's okay. Crying means you loved someone enough to hurt when they're gone. There's no shame in that." "Do you cry?" Emma asked, joining the conversation. "Sometimes. Usually alone, where no one can see. But maybe that's wrong, maybe I should let people see, so they know it's okay to be sad." Douglas's eyes found Lei's. "Your mother is very brave. She cries and still gets up every day to take care of you. That's real strength." The twins seemed satisfied with this. They returned to their sandwiches, the crisis averted with the quick emotional pivots only children could manage. But Lee sat with Douglas's words echoing in her head. Maybe I should let people see. How much did this powerful alpha hide? How many emotions did he bury under duty and control? After lunch, Vernon arrived to run through the evening's plan one more time. The twins were settled in the library with Patrika and a mountain of coloring books. In the study, Lee and Douglas reviewed their strategy. You'll enter with me, Douglas explained, pointing to a diagram of the council chamber. We'll take the center floor supplicant position, technically, but my rank gives us some protection. Vernon will present the evidence on screens while we speak. What if they try to stop the presentation? They can't. Council law requires that any member be allowed to present evidence before the full body. They'll try to shut us down after, claim the evidence is fabricated, call for an investigation that never happens. But we'll have gotten it on record, in front of witnesses. That's what matters. Lee studied the diagram, 12 seats arranged in a semicircle, each elevated above the floor where she and Douglas would stand, designed to intimidate, to remind supplicants of their place. I need to ask you something, she said quietly. Last night, you said Robbie made you promise to protect me. Was there more to that promise? Douglas stilled. What do you mean? Vernon mentioned, he said. Robbie showed you pictures of me 3 years ago. Talked about me for hours. That seems like more than just, this is my wife conversation. Silence stretched between them. Douglas moved to the window, his back to her, shoulders tight with tension. Robbie knew he was in danger, Douglas finally said. Not immediately, but eventually. He wanted contingencies in place. So yes, he made me promise to find you if anything happened. To protect you and the twins. To make sure you were financially secure. And nothing. Douglas. Lee stood, moved closer. I've spent the last 24 hours learning to read people's tells from council files. You're hiding something. He turned, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. He asked me if I could love you. Douglas said, voice rough. Not romantically, not then. But could I love his family the way he did? Could I care about his children, his wife, the life he'd built? Could I be the person who stood between you and the darkness he was fighting? What did you tell him? The truth. That I'd never met you, but I already cared because he cared. That I'd die before I let harm come to his family. Douglas's hands clenched at his sides. I didn't tell him that I'd looked at your pictures and thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. That I'd listened to his stories and felt jealous of what he had a mate, children, a reason to leave the violence behind. Lee's heart thundered. Douglas. He knew anyway. Robbie always knew things he shouldn't. The day before he died, he called me. Said if the worst happened, I should follow my instincts. Said you'd need someone strong, and I was the strongest person he knew. Said, Douglas's voice cracked. Said, he'd be honored if I loved his family after he was gone. If I loved you. The words hung in the air like a benediction and a curse. That's not fair, Lee whispered. He can't give permission from the grave for something that complicated. I know. That's why I've been keeping my distance. That's why I've been trying not to. He stopped himself, jaw clenched. Not to what? Not to fall for you. The confession was raw, painful. Not to notice how brave you are. How fierce with your children. How you look at me like I'm more than a title or a crown. Not to want things I have no right to want, when your husband, my brother, has only been gone 6 months. Lee couldn't breathe. The suppressants kept her biology in check, but they couldn't touch the emotional maelstrom Douglas's words created. I'm not ready, she said, hating how small her voice sounded. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for whatever this is. I know. Douglas's smile was sad. And I'll wait. However long it takes. I've gotten very good at waiting. Before Lee could respond, before she could sort through the tangle of guilt and want and terror in her chest, Vernon's phone rang. His expression went grim as he answered, listened, then ended the call. Your Majesty, Kent Sweeney just filed an emergency motion with the council. He's calling for your arrest on charges of harboring a fugitive and conspiracy. What fugitive? Douglas demanded. Mrs. Rogers. Vernon's voice was tight. He's claiming she stole classified documents from a government facility and that you're complicit in espionage. That's insane. It doesn't matter if it's true. He's forcing the council to vote tonight before we can present our evidence. If they vote to arrest you both, you'll be detained before you can speak. Douglas's expression went cold and calculating. Then we move now. Vernon. Call emergency session. My royal authority. Get every pack representative to that chamber in the next 4 hours. Kent wants to play games? Let's play. Your Majesty, an emergency session will only give us 2 hours to prepare instead of 8. We have everything we need. The evidence is solid. Lee is ready. Douglas looked at her, and despite everything they'd just confessed, despite the impossible emotional minefield they were navigating, his eyes held absolute confidence. Aren't you? Lee thought about her children upstairs, about Robbie's sacrifice, about every Omega suffering under council corruption while powerful alphas looked away. Yes, she said firmly. I'm ready. Then let's end this. 2 hours later, Lee stood in front of a mirror in a formal gown. Vernon had somehow procured deep emerald that brought out her eyes, conservative enough to be respectable, expensive enough to command respect. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant twist. She wore minimal makeup except for dark lipstick that made her look fiercer than she felt. She looked like someone important, someone powerful. She looked like an Omega who refused to be underestimated. Patrika appeared in the reflection, laying a gentle hand on her shoulder. The twins are secure with my team. They have strict instructions not to open doors for anyone except His Majesty, Vernon, or myself. They'll be safe. Promise me. I promise, on my life. Those children are protected. Emma and Ethan had been confused by the rush, the sudden change in plans. Leigh had explained in simple terms. Mama had to go to a very important meeting, like when grown-ups had to go to court or the principal's office. She'd be back soon. Uncle Douglas would keep her safe. The twins had accepted this with the easy trust of children who'd never been let down. Lee prayed she wouldn't be the first to break that trust. A knock. Vernon. Mrs. Rogers, the car is ready. His Majesty is waiting. This was it. No turning back now. Leigh took one last look at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger, elegant, composed, determined. Not the broke Omega who'd counted $5 in a parking lot 48 hours ago. But underneath, she was still that mother. Still fighting for her children's future. Still refusing to let fear win. Let's go expose some corrupt alphas, Leigh said. Vernon's smile was sharp. Now you sound like His Majesty. They descended the stairs. Douglas waited in the foyer. And when he saw her, he went absolutely still. His eyes darkened. His alpha presence flaring before he controlled it. You look. He stopped, cleared his throat. You look like a queen. I'm just an Omega widow. You're so much more than that. Douglas offered his arm, formal and proper. Ready to change the world. Leigh took his arm, felt his strength beneath the expensive suit jacket. With you? Yes. They walked to the car together, an Alpha King and an Omega mother, united by grief and purpose, and something neither was ready to name. Behind them, the estate stood silent and waiting. Inside, 2 children slept peacefully, dreaming of a future their parents were fighting to secure. And somewhere in the darkness, corrupt alphas scrambled to stop what was coming. They would fail. Because they'd forgotten the most basic rule: never underestimate the desperation of a mother protecting her young. Chapter 6. The Council's Chamber. The Council headquarters sat in the heart of the capital like a monument to alpha dominance, all glass and steel and architectural intimidation. Lee watched it approach through the car window, her stomach twisting with nerves that no amount of deep breathing could ease. Douglas sat beside her, silent and radiating controlled tension. He'd barely spoken since they left the estate, his attention focused on his phone as he coordinated with his team. Vernon rode in the front seat, reviewing documents on his tablet with single-minded intensity. How many people will be there? Leigh asked, needing to break the heavy silence. The 12 council members, obviously, Douglas answered, not looking up from his phone. Plus representatives from every major pack in the Northern Territories, that's another 43 alphas. Media won't be present for the initial session, but once we present evidence, I'm invoking public record law. Everything said tonight will be transcribed and available within 24 hours. So if they kill us, at least the truth dies publicly. Douglas's eyes snapped to hers, sharp with something between amusement and concern. No one is dying tonight. I've positioned my personal guard throughout the building. Kent Sweeney might be corrupt, but he's not stupid enough to commit murder in front of 50 witnesses. You hope. I know. Douglas's hand moved as if to take hers, then stopped. The almost touch felt more intimate than actual contact. Lay, if at any point this becomes too much, you can leave. I'll handle the presentation alone. No. Her voice was firm. Robbie died for this. I'm seeing it through. Robbie died so you could live. There's a difference. And I'm living by finishing what he started. That's my choice, Douglas. Don't take it from me. Something fierce and proud flickered in his expression. You're extraordinary. Do you know that? Before Lay could respond, before she could process the warmth his words created in her chest, the car pulled into the underground garage. Security was everywhere. Stone-faced betas in tactical gear, checkpoint scanners, cameras tracking their every move. Douglas exited first, then offered his hand to help Lay out. The moment her heels touched concrete, every nearby Alpha turned to look. She felt their assessment like physical weight. Omega, unknown, with the Alpha King. Speculation rippled through the garage in whispered conversations and exchanged glances. Douglas kept his hand at the small of her back, a gesture of protection and possession that made several Alphas step back deferentially. His message was clear. She was under his protection. Touch her and face him. They entered an elevator that required a key card and biometric scan. As the doors closed, sealing them in silence, Douglas finally spoke. Once we're in that chamber, everything changes. The Alphas will try to intimidate you. It's instinct. Establishing dominance. Don't make eye contact unless you're speaking directly to someone. Keep your shoulders back, chin up. You're not submitting to anyone in that room, understand? Even you. His jaw tightened. Especially not me. I need them to see you as my equal, not my subordinate. It's the only way they'll take your testimony seriously. The elevator opened onto a marble hallway lined with portraits of past council members, all male, all Alpha, all radiating the same arrogant certainty that they were chosen to lead. Lee studied their faces and felt cold rage settle in her bones. These men in the current council had built empires on the suffering of people like her. Omegas without pack protection, children without advocates, families torn apart by greed disguised as law. Not anymore. Vernon led them to massive double doors carved with pack symbols. 2 guards flanked the entrance, their expressions professionally neutral. One spoke into a radio, then nodded to his partner. The doors swung open. The council chamber was designed to overwhelm. The ceiling soared 40 feet high. All dark wood and ambient lighting that cast dramatic shadows. The 12 council seats formed a semicircle on an elevated platform, each chair a throne in its own right. The floor where supplicants stood was bare marble, deliberately exposed, making anyone who stood there feel small and vulnerable. Pack representatives filled tiered seating along the walls. Alphas, in expensive suits, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. The scent of so many dominant wolves in one space was overwhelming, making Lee's Omega instincts scream to flee. Douglas's hand pressed more firmly against her back. Steady, grounding. They walked to the center of the floor. Lee forced herself to breathe, to stand tall, to meet the moment with the dignity her children deserved. Kent Sweeney sat dead center in the council arrangement. He was everything Lee expected, late 50s, silver hair. Alpha arrogance written into every line of his face. His eyes tracked them with predatory intensity, calculating and cold. Alpha King Douglas Hammond. Kent's voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by strategic acoustics. You've called an emergency session. The council recognizes your authority to do so, but we question the necessity. What matter is so urgent it cannot wait for scheduled proceedings. Douglas stepped forward, his presence expanding to fill the entire chamber. When he spoke, his voice carried Alpha command, not aggressive, but undeniable. I bring charges against you, Kent Sweeney, and 3 other council members, Oscar Fox, Craig Carpenter, and Luther Harper. Charges of murder, trafficking, corruption, and treason against pack law. Shocked silence, then explosive reaction. Pack representatives erupted in conversation. Several council members shot to their feet, shouting denials and demands. Kent Sweeney alone remained seated, his expression glacial. Order! Kent slammed his gavel, the crack echoing like a gunshot. Order in this chamber. Alpha King. These are serious allegations. Do you have proof, or is this a desperate attempt to discredit the council because they dare to question your authority? I have proof. Douglas gestured to Vernon, who activated wall-mounted screens. 12 years of documented evidence, compiled by a man you murdered to keep silent. Evidence that will end your careers and put you in prison for the rest of your lives. What man? Craig Carpenter demanded. He was younger than Kent, maybe early 40s, with the build of someone who'd been military. Name your source, Your Majesty. Let us face our accuser. His name was Robbie Carney. Lee's voice rang out, surprising herself with its steadiness. He was my husband, the father of my children, and you killed him 6 months ago, then called it an accident. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. Lee felt the weight of their scrutiny, their dismissal Omega, emotional, unreliable. She lifted her chin higher. Mrs. Rogers. Kent's voice dripped with false sympathy. We understand you're grieving. Losing a mate is traumatic, and sometimes grief makes us see conspiracies where there are only tragedies. Your husband died in a construction accident. It's terrible, but accusing council members of murder won't bring him back. You're right, Lee said, her voice cutting through his patronizing tone like a blade. It won't bring him back. But it will stop you from killing anyone else, from trafficking any more Omegas, from stealing any more territory, from profiting off suffering while hiding behind pack law. Those are inflammatory accusations with no basis in. Show them, Douglas ordered Vernon. The screens lit up. Financial records, first money trails showing millions flowing through shell corporations into Kent Sweeney's personal accounts. Dates. Amounts. Sources. Irrefutable. These funds, Vernon's voice was clinical, professional, were traced to 3 separate trafficking operations. The individuals sold were predominantly Omega, predominantly minors. They were moved through council-controlled territories with falsified documentation signed by council members. More images. Photographs of transfer points, warehouses, vehicles. Audio recordings of Kent Sweeney discussing merchandise with cold efficiency. Video of Oscar Fox arranging weapons deals with military contractors. The chamber had gone silent. PAC representatives stared at the screens with expressions ranging from horror to rage. This is fabricated, Kent snarled. Digital forgery is easy. Then explain this. Douglas pulled a slim folder from his jacket. Original documents, seized from your private office by federal investigators 3 hours ago. Search warrant signed by a judge, executed while you were en route to this meeting. They found everything: ledgers, contracts, even a burner phone with text messages coordinating Robbie Carney's murder. Kent's face went pale. You had no authority. I had every authority. As Alpha King, I can request federal intervention in PAC matters when council corruption is suspected. I made that request 36 hours ago, the moment I confirmed Mrs. Rogers' identity and secured the evidence her husband compiled. Douglas's smile was cold. Did you really think I'd walk into this chamber unprepared? Craig Carpenter stood, his expression desperate. Your Majesty, even if some of this is true, and I'm not saying it is, you can't possibly think the entire council is involved. Kent may have acted alone. Show them file 17, Lee said quietly. Vernon complied. The screen filled with a photograph: Craig Carpenter meeting with a known trafficker, shaking hands over a table covered in cash. That was taken 14 months ago, Lee continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. My husband was the photographer. He was embedded in that trafficking ring for 3 months, gathering evidence. He documented every transaction, every meeting, every victim. 43 Omegas were sold through that operation. 17 were children under 15. Her voice cracked on the last words. Douglas moved infinitesimally closer, his presence a wall at her back. Where are those victims now? Someone called from the PAC representatives section. Scattered across 5 states, most still enslaved, Vernon answered. Federal agents have been coordinating rescue operations for the past 48 hours. 27 have been recovered so far. The others. He paused. We're still searching. A female alpha stood one of the PAC representatives, mid-40s, wearing traditional PAC leader regalia. I am Marlene Klein, alpha of the Western Mountain PAC. My niece disappeared 3 years ago. She was 16, Omega, beautiful. We searched for months, filed reports, begged the council for help. They told us she'd probably run away, that young Omegas were flighty, that we should accept she was gone. Marlene's voice shook with barely controlled rage. Is my niece in those files? Lee looked at Vernon, who scrolled through documents. His expression grew grim. Yesenia Nicholson. Sold to an alpha in Kent Sweeney's PAC on May 14th, 3 years ago. She's... She's one of the victims we haven't located yet. Marlene's howl of grief and fury echoed through the chamber. 2 other alphas had to restrain her from launching herself at Kent Sweeney. The chamber erupted. Pack representatives shouted questions, demands, accusations. Council members tried to restore order, but several were backing away from Kent and his co-conspirators, clearly trying to distance themselves from the scandal. Kent Sweeney stood, his alpha presence exploding outward in a wave of dominance that made several Omegas in the room whimper. Lee felt it crash against her. Submit, kneel, accept your place, but she locked her knees and refused. Enough. Kent's voice carried supernatural command. This is a coup attempt. Nothing more. The Alpha King wants to consolidate power, so he fabricates evidence and parades a grieving widow like a puppet. I'm not a puppet. Lee's voice cut through his tirade. Every eye snapped to her. I'm a mother. I'm the wife of a hero who died exposing your crimes. And I'm the woman who's going to watch you burn for what you did to my family. Kent's lips curled in a sneer. Bold words for an Omega. But words are all you have. You're nobody, a construction worker's widow, with delusions of. Show them the recording, Douglas commanded. Vernon hesitated. Your Majesty, are you certain? Once this is public, show them. The screens went dark, then lit with video footage. Grainy. Shot from a hidden angle. But the audio was crystal clear. Robbie's voice, captured 6 days before he died. This is my final report. Kent Sweeney has ordered my execution. I overheard him on a call this morning, telling Oscar Fox to handle the construction site problem permanently. I have 48 hours, maybe less. Douglas, if you're watching this, you know what to do. Elena, if you're watching this. His voice softened, broke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't give you the life you deserved. I'm sorry I lied about who I was. I'm sorry I'm leaving you alone. But please, please finish this, don't let them win. Tell our babies I love them, tell them their daddy tried to make the world better. And tell Douglas Robbie's face filled the screen, tears tracking down his cheeks. Tell Douglas to keep his promise. Take care of my family, love them like I did. They're yours now, brother, don't let me down. The recording ended. Silence blanketed the chamber like snow. Lee was crying, couldn't help it. Seeing Robbie's face, hearing his voice, knowing those were his last recorded words, it shattered something in her chest. Douglas's hand found her shoulder, squeezed once, grounding her. Marlene Klein spoke into the silence, her voice deadly calm. I call for an immediate vote. Kent Sweeney, Oscar Fox, Craig Carpenter, and Luther Harper are hereby removed from the council and remanded to federal custody pending trial. All in favor? Every hand in the PAC representatives section rose. Several council members raised their hands too, including some Lee hadn't suspected were clean. Motion carries, Marlene said. Guards, take them into custody. Kent Sweeney moved faster than Lee expected. His hand went to his jacket, a weapon. Had to be, but Douglas was faster. The Alpha King crossed the distance in a blur of motion, slamming Kent back into his chair with enough force to crack the wood. Don't, Douglas growled, his alpha dominance fully unleashed. I've wanted an excuse to rip your throat out since I found out what you did to my brother. Don't give me one in front of witnesses. Federal agents poured into the chamber. Vernon must have called them the moment the vote passed. Kent and his 3 conspirators were cuffed and led away, their protests and threats echoing as the doors closed behind them. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Marlene approached Leigh, her eyes red-rimmed but fierce. Thank you, she whispered. For being brave enough to finish what your husband started. I'll find my niece now. Because of you and him, I'll bring her home. Other alphas approached pack leaders whose territories had been stolen, whose family members had disappeared, who'd suspected council corruption but had no proof. They thanked her, thanked Douglas, pledged support for whatever reforms were needed. Lee accepted their words numbly, still reeling from seeing Robbie's face, from the enormity of what they'd just accomplished. Vernon materialized at her elbow. Mrs. Rogers, there are media representatives requesting statements. His Majesty is handling formal press briefings. But several outlets specifically want your perspective as... No, Douglas appeared, his presence scattering the approaching alphas like leaves. No statements tonight. Mrs. Rogers has done enough. She's going home. But your Majesty, home, now. Douglas's tone left no room for argument. He looked at Lee, and his expression gentled. You've been extraordinary tonight, But you're exhausted, you're grieving, and you need to be with your children. The media circus can wait. Lee wanted to argue. Wanted to prove she could handle more, that she wasn't weak or fragile. But the adrenaline was crashing, and suddenly all she wanted was to hold Emma and Ethan, to reassure herself they were safe, that this nightmare was ending. Okay, she whispered. Take me home. Douglas offered his arm. Lee took it, and together they walked out of the council chamber. An Alpha King and an Omega Widow who'd just changed the world. Behind them, PAC representatives were already discussing council reforms, victim recovery, reparations. The work was just beginning. But tonight, they'd won. Tonight, Robbie's sacrifice had meaning. Tonight, corrupt alphas would finally face justice. And tonight Lee could finally breathe. The drive back to the estate was silent. Lee stared out the window, watching the city lights give way to forest darkness, trying to process everything that had happened. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. Kent Sweeney was in custody. The evidence was public record. Victims would be found. Families reunited. The council reformed. Robbie's dream was real. You were incredible, Douglas said quietly. The way you stood up to Kent. The strength in your voice, Robbie would have been so proud. I was terrified. That's what made it brave. Douglas's hand found hers in the darkness of the car, fingers lacing together. Lee. His phone rang. Vernon's name flashed on the screen. Douglas answered, his expression darkening as he listened. When? How many? Understood. Increase security, lock down the estate, and get federal agents on site. We're 10 minutes out. He ended the call, his jaw tight. What's wrong? Lee's heart hammered. Luther Harper escaped custody during transfer. He's armed, dangerous, and according to intercepted communications, he's heading to the estate. Douglas's eyes met hers, fierce and protective. He's coming for you and the twins. And he'll be there before we are. Chapter 7. The final stand. The car accelerated, engine roaring as their driver pushed the speed limit to braking. Lay's fingers dug into the leather seat, her phone pressed to her ear as Patrika's calm voice tried to reassure her. The twins are secure in the panic room, Patrika said. I have 4 guards with me, and the room is completely sealed. No one gets through those doors without the code, and only you, His Majesty, and Vernon have it. Luther Harper is former Special Forces, Lee said, her voice shaking despite her efforts to control it. If he's coming for them, then he'll fail. Mrs. Rogers. I spent 20 years in hostile territory extraction. I've protected diplomats, royalty, and assets, far more vulnerable than 2 clever children in a fortified bunker. Trust me. They're safe. Lay wanted to believe her. But fear was a living thing in her chest, clawing at her lungs, making it hard to breathe. Emma and Ethan, her babies, her entire world were in danger, because she'd stood up to corrupt alphas, because she'd finished what Robbie started. Douglas was on his own phone, coordinating with his security team in clipped, military-efficient commands. Perimeter breach at the north gate. How many? Luther Harper and 3 others understood. Engage at will, but I want Harper alive if possible. If not possible. His expression went cold. Do what's necessary. He ended the call, immediately dialing another number. This is Alpha King Hammond. I need federal tactical response at my estate immediately. Coordinates are being sent now. We have an escaped federal prisoner attempting to breach secure location with hostages inside. Authorization code Delta 79er. A pause. Yes, I'll hold. Lee forced herself to think through the panic. How did he escape? Federal custody should be. Someone helped him, Vernon said grimly from the front seat. Luther Harper doesn't have the resources or connections to break federal transport on his own. Someone with power wanted him free, wanted him to come after you. But we exposed the council. We exposed 4 council members. There are 8 others, and we don't know how deep the corruption runs. Douglas's hand found Lee's, squeezed hard. I should have anticipated this. Should have predicted they'd try something desperate. Stop. Lee's voice was stronger than she felt. No more shoulda coulda. We deal with what's happening now. How long until we're there? 6 minutes, the driver called back. And federal response? 12 minutes, Douglas said. Maybe 10 if they push it. 6 minutes for them to arrive, 10 for backup, which meant they'd be facing Luther Harper and his team alone for at least 4 minutes. 4 minutes where anything could happen. I need a weapon, Lay said. Douglas stared at her. Lee, you don't know how to Then teach me in the next 6 minutes. You're not leaving me in the car while you fight. And I'm not going in unarmed. Those are my children. My choice. Give me a weapon, Douglas. Something fierce and proud flickered in his eyes. He reached under the seat, pulled out a locked case, and opened it with his thumbprint. Inside were 2 handguns, compact, deadly efficient. This is a Glock 19, Douglas said, placing one in her hands. Safety here. Slide release here. Point and shoot the trigger pull. Is about 5 pounds of pressure. Aim center mass, never at limbs. If you have to shoot, shoot to stop the threat, understand? Lee's hands shook as she held the weapon. It was heavier than she expected, cold and real and terrifying. I've never shot anyone. You won't have to. My team will handle Luther. But if and only if someone gets past us, past the guards, past every layer of protection we have, and they're between you and your children. Douglas's eyes locked onto hers. You do what mothers do. You protect your young. No hesitation. No mercy. Lee nodded, checking the safety twice, tucking the gun into the pocket of her coat. Her elegant gown from the council meeting was utterly inappropriate for combat, but there was no time to change. The estate gates came into view. They were open-breeched, hanging at odd angles where Luther's team had rammed through. Bullet casings littered the ground. 2 security guards were down, being tended by medical personnel. They're alive, Vernon reported, his phone to his ear. Wounded but stable. Luther's team went straight for the main house. Douglas was out of the car before it fully stopped, moving with lethal purpose. Lee followed, Vernon at her side, both of them struggling to keep pace with the Alpha King's ground-eating stride. The front door was splintered, hanging from one hinge. Inside, the beautiful foyer Lee had admired just days ago was a war zone. Furniture overturned, bullet holes in the walls, blood on the marble floors. Security team? Douglas barked into his radio. 3 down, 2 functional, came the crackling response. Luther Harper and 2 associates headed to the lower levels. We've got 1 pinned in the east wing. The panic room, Lay gasped. They're going for. They won't get through. Douglas was already moving, taking stairs 3 at a time. That room was built to withstand siege. But we end this now. Vernon, coordinate with federal response. Lee, stay behind me. They descended into the basement, the same path Lay had taken to see Robbie's evidence archives. But now the clinical lighting felt ominous, the concrete walls claustrophobic. Every corner could hide danger. Gunfire erupted ahead, short, controlled bursts. Douglas motioned them to stop, then moved forward with his weapon raised, clearing corners with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. A body lay at the first junction, one of Luther's associates, taken down by Douglas's security team. Beyond him, the corridor stretched toward the panic room, where Luther Harper stood, placing something against the reinforced door. Explosives! Douglas roared. Get back. He tackled Lee and Vernon around the corner just as the explosion ripped through the corridor. The concussive force was enormous, even muffled by walls and distance. Dust and debris rained down, alarms shrieking. Lee's ears rang. She couldn't hear, could barely see through the smoke. But she could feel Douglas hauling her to her feet, his mouth moving in words she couldn't process. Then sound returned in a rush. Screaming. Children screaming. Emma! Ethan! Lee lunged forward. But Douglas caught her. Wait, the structure could be unstable, there could be. She didn't care. Couldn't care. Her children were screaming, and nothing else mattered. Lee tore free from Douglas's grip and ran into the smoke-filled corridor. The panic room door was breached, not destroyed. The explosives had been precisely placed to damage the locking mechanism without collapsing the entrance. Military precision. Luther Harper stood just inside the doorway, his weapon trained on Patricia Bowman, who stood between him and the twins. Emma and Ethan huddled behind her, their small faces streaked with tears and dust. Mrs. Rogers, Luther said pleasantly, as if they were meeting at a social event. How convenient. Now I don't have to drag these screaming brats out to use as bait. He was maybe 45, built like the soldier he'd been, with cold eyes that showed no remorse. Blood stained his sleeve. He'd been wounded in the breach, but it didn't seem to slow him. Let them go, Lay said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Her hand moved to the gun in her pocket, fingers closing around the grip. This is between us. You want me? Fine. But leave my children alone. Oh, I don't want you, Mrs. Rogers. I want leverage. Luther's smile was cruel. The Alpha King is right behind you, isn't he? I can smell him. And he'll negotiate for those children's lives. He'll give me safe passage, money, whatever I need to disappear. All because you made him care about some dead operative's kids. I'm not negotiating. Douglas's voice came from behind Lee, cold as winter death. You're going back into custody. The only question is whether you walk out or get carried. Big words for someone who won't risk these children's lives. Luther shifted his aim to Ethan. I pull this trigger. The boy dies. Then the girl. Then the old woman. Then Mrs. Rogers. You might kill me eventually, but how many bodies will there be first? Lee felt Douglas's presence behind her, solid, protective, radiating barely controlled violence. She could sense his calculation, the tactical assessment running through his mind. He was fast, incredibly fast. But Luther had the advantage of position, hostages, and nothing to lose. What do you want? Douglas asked. Helicopter to the Canadian border. $10 million in cryptocurrency. And a 12-hour head start before you declare me fugitive. Done. Luther blinked, clearly not expecting such quick agreement. Just like that? Just like that. I'll have Vernon arrange everything. But you release the children and Patricia now. You keep Mrs. Rogers as insurance until you're safely across the border. No. Lee spun to face Douglas. You can't. I can and I will. Douglas's eyes bored into hers, trying to communicate something she couldn't quite read. Your children's safety comes first. Always. Isn't that what you'd choose? Lee's mind raced. Douglas was planning something. Had to be. He wouldn't just let Luther take her. Wouldn't let a corrupt alpha walk free after everything they'd done to expose the council. But what? Then she understood. The way Douglas's hand moved in a specific pattern. The subtle positioning of his body. He was giving her an opening. A split second where Luther would be focused on the hostage exchange instead of threats. She had to trust him. Had to trust that 4 years of loving Robbie Carney had taught her to recognize when an alpha was asking her to take a leap of faith. Fine, Lee said, moving toward Luther. Let my babies go. I'll be your hostage. Luther's weapon tracked her movement, but his attention flickered to the children just a fraction of a second where his focus divided. Douglas moved. One moment he was behind Leigh. The next he was airborne, his alpha speed and power launching him at Luther Harper with supernatural force. His body became a weapon, striking with precision born from years of combat. But Luther was special forces too. He rolled with the impact, his weapon coming up, finger on the trigger. Lee didn't think. Didn't hesitate. Her hand yanked the Glock from her pocket. Safety off. Aim center mass like Douglas taught her. She fired. The recoil shocked her, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Her shot went wide. She wasn't trained, didn't know how to compensate for the kick, but it was enough. Luther flinched, his aim thrown off. Douglas's hand clamped around Luther's wrist, twisting with brutal efficiency. Bone cracked. The weapon clattered to the floor. What followed was savage and quick. Douglas fought with the unleashed violence of an alpha protecting his pack. No mercy, no hesitation, just brutal effectiveness. Luther tried to counter, tried to use his training, but he was already wounded and facing an alpha king whose protective instincts had been triggered. 30 seconds. That's all it took for Douglas to render Luther Harper unconscious and bleeding on the floor. Then Douglas was on his feet, moving to Leigh, his hands on her face, her shoulders, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? Lee, look at me, are you hurt? I'm fine. I'm the twins. Patricia had already swept Emma and Ethan away from the violence, shielding them with her body. Both children were crying but appeared unharmed. Leigh rushed to them, dropping to her knees and pulling them into her arms. Mama, Emma sobbed into her shoulder. The bad man was scary, and there was a big boom and, I know, baby, I know. But it's over now. You're safe. You're both safe. Leigh looked up at Douglas, who stood over Luther's unconscious form, his chest heaving, his expression still locked in protective fury. We're all safe. Federal tactical teams poured into the basement moments later, medics rushing to check everyone for injuries. Luther Harper was cuffed, loaded onto a stretcher under heavy guard. This time there would be no escape. Vernon appeared, somehow still impeccably dressed despite the chaos. The other 2 associates are in custody. No additional casualties among our team. Federal agents are securing the perimeter, and we have 3 news helicopters circling the estate despite the no-fly zone. He paused. Mrs. Rogers, you saved His Majesty's life. That shot badly aimed as it was created the opening he needed. She shouldn't have had to shoot at all, Douglas said roughly. He'd barely let Lee out of his sight since the fight ended, hovering close like he couldn't quite believe she was real and whole. I should have had better security. Should have anticipated. Stop, Lee interrupted. She stood, still holding both twins. We're alive. The bad guys are in custody. That's what matters. Everything else is just noise. Douglas looked at her, this Omega who'd stood before the council, who'd shot at an armed mercenary to protect him, who'd survived losing everything and come back stronger, and something in his expression cracked open. I need to. He stopped, shook his head. Vernon, handle the federal debrief. Patricia, get the twins checked by medical. Lee, come with me. Please. It wasn't a command. It was a request, almost desperate. Lee kissed her children, promised them she'd be right back, and followed Douglas through the damaged estate to a small study she hadn't seen before. This one was personal photos on the walls, books worn from reading, a space that was his rather than just another formal room. The moment the door closed, Douglas rounded on her. Don't ever do that again, he said, voice shaking. Don't ever put yourself between me and danger. Don't ever. He stopped, ran his hands through his hair. When I saw you aim that gun, when I realized you were willing to shoot someone to save me, You what? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could see was you getting hurt, dying, leaving those children without a mother because you were protecting me. Douglas's hands clenched at his sides. I'm supposed to protect you, Lay. That's my job. My duty, my sa. Your what? Lee stepped closer, her heart hammering. Say it, Douglas. Finish the sentence. His eyes met hers, ice blue and burning. My right. As your alpha. As your mate. As the man who's been falling in love with you since the moment you stepped out of that car and looked at me like I was just a person, not a king. The world stopped. Douglas, I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving Robbie. I know I have no business feeling this way when he's only been gone 6 months. But I can't. His voice broke. I can't keep pretending I'm just fulfilling a promise to a dead friend. I can't keep telling myself this is duty when every time I see you with your children, every time you show that incredible strength, every time you look at me like I'm worth something beyond my title. Lay closed the distance between them, rose on her toes, and kissed him. It wasn't gentle, wasn't tentative. It was 6 months of grief and loneliness and fear crashing into impossible attraction and trust and something that felt terrifyingly like hope. Douglas froze for one heartbeat, then surrendered. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back with all the desperate hunger he'd been holding in check. He tasted like danger and safety, like promises and possibilities, like everything Lee had thought she'd never want again. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Douglas pressed his forehead to hers. I don't deserve you, he whispered. That's not your decision to make. Lee's hands fisted in his shirt. I'm not ready for forever, Douglas. I'm not ready to call this a mating bond or make promises about the future. But I'm ready to try, to see where this goes. If you can be patient, I'll wait as long as you need, years if necessary, decades, whatever it takes. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. But Lee, you need to understand my alpha is already convinced you're mine. The mate bond is forming whether we want it or not. It'll get stronger, more insistent. If you decide this isn't what you want, you need to tell me soon. Before the bond becomes permanent. Before you what? Before I become incapable of letting you go. Lee should have been scared. Should have run from the intensity in his eyes, the possessive edge to his words. But she'd spent 6 months being scared, being alone, being strong for her children while crumbling inside. Maybe it was okay to lean on someone. Maybe it was okay to want things for herself. Maybe Robbie's last request for Douglas to love his family had been permission all along. I'm not going anywhere, Lee said softly. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. But Douglas, if we do this, you're not just getting me. You're getting 2 4-year-olds who will test your patience, exhaust your energy, and demand bedtime stories in ridiculous voices. His smile was slow, genuine, transforming his face. I make an excellent dragon voice. And my princess voice needs work. But I'm willing to practice. Despite everything, the violence, the fear, the insanity of the past 48 hours, Lei laughed. Somewhere above them, her children were safe. The council was being reformed. Victims were being recovered. Justice was happening. And here, in this small study with an alpha king who looked at her like she hung the moon, Lei let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, happiness wasn't a betrayal of the past. It was a gift worth fighting for. Chapter 8. Healing in the Light. 3 days after Luther Harper's attack, the estate had returned to something resembling normalcy. Federal investigators had finished processing the scene, contractors were repairing the damaged basement, and the media circus had finally shifted focus to the council trials beginning in federal court. Lee sat on the back patio, morning coffee in hand, watching Emma and Ethan chase butterflies through the garden. They'd bounced back with the resilience only children possess. Nightmares the first night, clingy the second, and by the third morning they were back to their chaotic, joyful selves. She hadn't bounced back quite so quickly. Every shadow made her jump. Every unexpected sound sent her heart racing. She'd check on the twins compulsively 3, 4, 5 times a night just to reassure herself they were breathing, safe, still there. The therapist Douglas had hired said it was normal, that trauma took time to process, that she needed to be patient with herself. Patience had never been her strong suit. "You're thinking too loud." Douglas's voice came from the doorway. He carried 2 plates loaded with the elaborate breakfast Patrika had prepared: fresh fruit, pastries, eggs prepared 3 different ways because no one could decide which style they wanted. He'd been doing this, showing up with food, with coffee, with his presence, never pushing, never demanding, just there. A solid, steady presence in the chaos. "Just watching them," Lee said. "Making sure they're real." Douglas settled into the chair beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "They're real. Safe. Happy. You did that, Lei. You protected them. We did that. You started it. I just followed your lead." He took a sip of coffee, his eyes tracking the twins' movements, with the same protective vigilance Lee recognized in herself. Vernon called this morning. "Kent Sweeney is pleading guilty to avoid trial. 40 years minimum. No parole. Oscar Fox and Craig Carpenter are following suit. Luther Harper's facing life without possibility of release. And the other council members. 8 have been cleared of direct involvement, though 2 are stepping down due to negligence and oversight." Douglas's tone made clear what he thought of that excuse. The council is being restructured: mandatory audits, oversight committees, victim advocacy representatives. It'll take years to rebuild trust, but it's a start. Lee should have felt triumphant. They'd won. Justice was happening. But all she felt was tired. "How many victims have they recovered?" she asked quietly. 41 out of the 63 documented in Robbie's files. The others. Douglas's jaw tightened. "Some are deceased. Some are so deeply hidden we may never find them, but we're still looking." Marlene Klein's niece Yesenia was found yesterday in Montana, traumatized, but alive. Marlene is bringing her home today. 41 lives saved. 22 still suffering or worse. The math was brutal, heartbreaking. But Lee clung to the 41. 41 families reunited. 41 people who had futures again. "Robbie would be proud," she whispered. "He'd be proud of you." Douglas's hand found hers, fingers lacing together with the easy intimacy they'd developed over the past 3 days. "You finished what he started. You stood in front of the council and didn't break. You're extraordinary, Lee." She wanted to believe him, but exhaustion made it hard to feel extraordinary. She just felt empty, like she'd been running on adrenaline for months, and now that the immediate danger was over, her body was demanding payment for all that borrowed energy. "I need to figure out what happens next," Lee said. "The twins and I can't live here forever. You have your duties as Alpha King, and we're—" "Stop." Douglas turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Lee, I told you 3 days ago how I feel. That hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten stronger. You and the children can stay here as long as you want. Forever, if that's what you choose." "Douglas, we barely know each other. I know you're brave. I know you're fierce. I know you love your children more than anything in the world. I know you take your coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. I know you read to the twins every night, doing different voices for each character. I know you check on them at least 5 times after bedtime. I know you cry in the shower where no one can hear you, because you don't want the twins to worry. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. I know you, Lei. Maybe not everything. Not yet. But I know what matters. Lee's throat closed. It's too fast. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting we've lived through more intensity in 4 days than most couples experience in years. Combat bonds people. Lei. Crisis strips away all the surface stuff and shows you who someone really is at their core. And I like who you are at your core. I kissed you. Lee said, the words tumbling out. 3 days ago. I kissed you. And I haven't known what to do about it since. Because I wanted to, Douglas. God help me, I wanted to kiss you, wanted to feel something other than grief and fear, but that feels like betrayal. Of Robbie? Of everything. Of my marriage, of the man I loved, of the life we built. How can I want you when he's only been gone 6 months? What kind of person does that make me? Douglas set down his coffee, shifted to kneel in front of her chair so they were eye to level. His hands framed her face, gentle but firm, forcing her to meet his gaze. It makes you human, he said quietly. It makes you someone who's been through hell and is still looking for reasons to keep going. Robbie loved you, Lei. I know that because he talked about you constantly, your smile, your strength, the way you made him want to be better. Do you think a man who loved you that much would want you to stop living because he died? I don't know, Lee whispered. I don't know what he'd want. I do. Because he told me. Douglas pulled a folded letter from his pocket. He gave this to me 3 years ago, when he first told me about you. Made me promise to only give it to you if something happened to him, and if his exact words, you're too stubborn to let yourself be happy. Leigh's hands shook as she took the letter. Robbie's handwriting. Her name on the envelope in his familiar scrawl. You've had this the whole time? I didn't think you were ready. But Leigh, watching you torture yourself over feelings that are natural and healthy and good, I can't do it anymore. Read it, please. Leigh opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The letter was dated 3 years ago, right around Emma and Ethan's first birthday. My beautiful Leigh, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And knowing you, you're probably feeling guilty about something, not providing enough, not being strong enough, not grieving properly. You always were too hard on yourself. First, stop it. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Whatever situation you're in right now, you're handling it better than you think you are. Second, and this is important, I don't want you to grieve me forever. I don't want you to wear black for years or keep my picture on the mantle like a shrine or tell the twins sad stories about their dead father. I want you to live, to laugh, to find happiness again, even if, especially if that happiness includes someone else. I know that probably sounds insane. What kind of husband gives his wife permission to move on? But here's the thing, I love you too much to want you stuck in the past. I love you too much to want you alone, raising our children without support, denying yourself joy because you think it disrespects my memory. It doesn't. You being happy would honor me more than any amount of mourning. Now, if Douglas is with you and if you're reading this, he probably is. I need you to know something. He's a good man. The best I've ever known. Aside from you, yes. You're a man in this context. Deal with it. He's honorable, protective. And underneath all that alpha king posturing, he's lonely as hell. He needs someone to see him as a person, not a title. You're good at that. I asked him to protect you if anything happened to me. But between you and me, I was hoping for more than just protection. I was hoping he'd give you and the twins the life I couldn't, security, safety, a future without fear. And maybe, if you're both brave enough, something deeper. I'm not saying you have to fall in love with him. I'm not saying you have to do anything. I'm just saying don't close yourself off from possibilities because you think you owe me eternal grief. You don't. You owe me happiness. You owe our children a mother who's fully present, not trapped in the past. You owe yourself permission to live. So live, Lee. Love again. Let Douglas in, or don't, but make that choice based on what you want, not what you think you should want. I love you. I'll always love you. And wherever I am, I'm cheering for you to find joy. Yours, Robbie. P.S. Douglas. If you're reading over her shoulder, and you probably are, you nosy bastard. Take care of my family. Love them the way I did. Don't screw this up, or I'll haunt your royal ass. Lee read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Douglas waited patiently, his presence solid and grounding. He knew, Lee finally said. He knew what might happen between us. He hoped, Douglas corrected gently. And he gave us his blessing. But Lee, that letter doesn't obligate you to anything. If you don't want this, if you don't want me, I'll respect that. I'll still protect you and the twins, still make sure you have everything you need. But I won't push for more than you're ready to give. Lee looked at this alpha king who'd fought for her, protected her children, sat patiently while she grieved another man, who'd shown her what safety felt like, what partnership could be, what it meant to be valued not for what she could provide but simply for existing. She thought about Robbie's words. You owe me happiness. I'm not ready for forever, she said slowly. I'm not ready to call this a mating bond, or wear your mark, or make promises about 50 years from now. Something died in Douglas's eyes, but he nodded. I understand. I'm not finished. Lay set the letter aside, took both his hands in hers. I'm not ready for forever. But I'm ready for today. For tomorrow. For taking things one day at a time and seeing where they lead. I'm ready to let you in, Douglas. Slowly, carefully, with a lot of talking and probably some backsliding when the grief hits hard. But I'm ready to try. Hope flickered across his face. You're sure? No, but I'm sure I don't want to keep pushing you away. I'm sure my children light up when you're around. I'm sure that when you hold me, I feel safe for the first time since Robbie died. And I'm sure that Robbie, her voice caught, Robbie would want this. Would want me to be happy. So I'm choosing happiness. I'm choosing to try. Douglas surged forward, capturing her mouth in a kiss that was tender and fierce and full of promise. Lee melted into it, let herself feel without guilt, without fear, just the pure rightness of his lips on hers, his hands in her hair, his scent surrounding her. Mama is kissing Uncle Douglas. They broke apart to find Emma and Ethan standing 3 feet away, eyes wide, expressions caught between shock and delight. Does this mean Uncle Douglas is going to be our new daddy? Ethan asked with the blunt directness of a 4-year-old. Lee flushed crimson. Douglas, to his credit, handled it with remarkable composure. That's up to your mom, he said seriously. But I'd like to be. If you'd be okay with that. It wouldn't mean I'm replacing your father, no one could do that. But I could be someone who loves you and protects you and teaches you cool stuff. If that sounds good? Emma and Ethan exchanged one of those wordless twin communications. Can we still call you Uncle Douglas? Emma asked. You can call me whatever makes you comfortable. Do you know how to build a fort? Ethan demanded. A really good one, not like the blanket ones Mama makes. No offense, Mama. None taken, Lee said, laughing despite herself. I know how to build excellent forts, Douglas confirmed. In fact, I'm something of a fort-building expert. Then you can stay, Ethan declared, as if he'd been the one making the decision all along. But you have to let us help build the forts. Deal. Emma climbed into Lee's lap, her small face serious. Mama, are you happy? Really happy. Not pretend happy. Lee hugged her daughter close, breathing in the little girl's scent of her. Yeah, baby. I'm happy. Sad too sometimes because I miss Daddy. But happy. Good. Because Uncle Douglas makes you smile. And you didn't smile for a really long time. Out of the mouths of babes. The rest of the morning dissolved into fort construction, an elaborate affair involving couch cushions, dining chairs, and every blanket in the house. Douglas took his duties as fort architect seriously, following the twins' increasingly elaborate demands with military precision. Lee watched from the sidelines, coffee growing cold in her hands, heart fuller than it had been in months. This wasn't the life she'd planned. Wasn't the future she'd imagined when she married Robbie 8 years ago. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it was built on the foundation of sacrifice and love that Robbie had provided. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. That evening, after the twins were finally in bed, a process that took twice as long because they insisted Douglas do bedtime stories, and his dragon voice was apparently the best ever, Lay and Douglas found themselves alone in the library. I should go, Douglas said, making no move to leave. Let you rest. It's been a long day. Stay, Lay said. Just for a while. I don't want to be alone yet. He settled beside her on the couch, and she curled into his side with an ease that should have felt strange but didn't. His arm came around her shoulders, solid and warm. What happens now? Lay asked quietly. With us, I mean. What does taking it slow look like when you're the Alpha King and I'm living in your house? It looks like whatever we want it to look like, Douglas said. No expectations. No timelines. We spend time together, get to know each other properly, let the twins adjust. When you're ready for more, if you're ready for more, you tell me. And if I'm never ready for the mate bond, then we figure out what we can have instead. His hand stroked through her hair, gentle and soothing. Lee, I'm not going to lie and say I don't want the bond. I do. My Alpha wants to mark you, claim you, make it official. But I want you happy more than I want the bond. So we go at your pace, and we figure it out as we go. Lee tilted her head to look up at him. You're very patient for an Alpha King, only with you. Everyone else gets the demanding, imperious version. You get the real me. Lucky me. Lucky me. His smile was soft. Lucky us. They sat in comfortable silence, the crackling fire, the only sound. Lee felt herself drifting, the exhaustion of the past days catching up with her. Safe, warm, held. Lay? Douglas's voice was quiet. Thank you. For giving me a chance. For trusting me with your children, with yourself. I won't take that for granted. You better not. She mumbled, already half asleep. I have a gun now, and I'm not afraid to use it. Badly, but still. His laugh rumbled through his chest, vibrating against her cheek. Duly noted. One poorly aimed but enthusiastic shooter. I'm terrified. You should be. The last thing Lee remembered before sleep claimed her was Douglas's lips pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head, his whispered words a promise and a prayer. Sleep, my fierce Omega. I've got you. I've always got you. And for the first time in 6 months, Lay slept without nightmares. Chapter 9. Building Forever. 6 weeks later, Lay stood in the estate's kitchen at 6 a.m, attempting to make pancakes from scratch because Emma had declared that store-bought mix tastes like sadness. Douglas leaned against the counter, coffee in hand, watching her with poorly concealed amusement. You're burning them, he observed. I am not burning them, they're golden brown. Golden black, maybe. Lee pointed the spatula at him threateningly. You're supposed to be supportive, not critical. That's supportive partner 101. I am being supportive. I'm supporting your journey toward accepting that cooking isn't your strength. His grin was infuriating and charming in equal measure. I could take over. No. I'm proving a point to my daughter. I can make pancakes. She flipped one, which promptly fell apart. Damn it. Douglas moved behind her, his hands settling on her hips, his chest warm against her back. Here. You're flipping too early. Wait until the bubbles pop and the edges look dry. Like this. He guided her hand, helping her flip the next pancake with perfect timing. It worked. The pancake was actually golden brown, not golden black. Show off. Lee muttered. But she leaned back into him, letting herself enjoy the casual intimacy they'd built over the past weeks. 6 weeks of taking it slow. 6 weeks of family dinners, and bedtime stories, and fort-building competitions. 6 weeks of Douglas teaching the twins self-defense moves in the backyard while Lee pretended not to have a heart attack every time they practiced escape holds. 6 weeks of stolen kisses when the children weren't looking. Of hands held under the dinner table. Of goodnight embraces that lasted longer each time. 6 weeks of healing. The nightmares had decreased. Lay only checked on the twins twice a night now, instead of 5 times. She could hear unexpected noises without immediately reaching for the gun she'd kept in her nightstand, though she still had it, just in case. The therapist said progress wasn't linear, that there would be bad days mixed with the good, but the good days were starting to outnumber the bad. Mama, are the pancakes ready? Ethan's voice preceded him into the kitchen, followed by his pajama-clad self, and an equally disheveled Emma, almost baby. Why are you both up so early? We had a meeting, Emma announced seriously. A twin meeting. Very important business. Douglas raised an eyebrow at Lee over the twins' heads. She shrugged. Twin meetings had become a thing lately. The two of them would disappear into one of their rooms, whisper intensely for 10 minutes, then emerge with some declaration or demand that was always presented as joint decision. What did you discuss in this meeting? Douglas asked, crouching to their level with the ease he'd developed over the past weeks. Ethan and Emma exchanged one of their wordless communications. Then Ethan stepped forward, his small face solemn. "Uncle Douglas, we would like to hire you," he said in his most grown-up voice. "Hire me? For what?" "To be our daddy." Emma stepped forward too, equally serious. "We had a meeting, and we discussed your qualifications, and we think you'd be very good at it." Lee's heart stopped. Douglas's expression cycled through surprise, joy, and something that looked dangerously close to tears. His voice was rough. He cleared his throat, tried again. "That's a very important job. What would my duties be?" "You have to love Mama," Emma said, ticking off on her fingers. "And love us, and teach us cool stuff, and protect us from bad guys, and make Mama smile, and read us stories, and not replace our real daddy," Ethan interrupted, his voice going small. "Because we love our real daddy, and we don't want to forget him." Douglas's hands settled on both their shoulders, gentle but firm. "Listen to me, both of you. Your real daddy was one of the bravest, best men I ever knew. He loved you more than anything in the world. Nothing, and I mean nothing, could ever replace him. He'll always be your father." "Then what would you be?" Emma asked. "I'd be someone else who loves you. Someone who wants to take care of you and protect you and be there when you need me. Maybe like an extra daddy? A bonus dad?" The twins considered this, with the seriousness only 4-year-olds could bring to major life decisions. "Do you love Mama?" Ethan asked bluntly. Douglas's eyes found Lee's across the kitchen. "Yes, very much." "Do you love us?" "More than I thought possible." "Will you stay forever?" Emma's voice wavered. "Or will you leave like Daddy did?" Douglas pulled them both into a hug, his voice thick when he spoke. "I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, but I can promise that I'll fight with everything I have to stay with you. To be here for birthdays and first days of school and teaching you to drive and walking you down the aisle and meeting your children someday. I want all of it, if you'll let me." Emma and Ethan hugged him back fiercely. Then they pulled away, nodded to each other, and turned to Lay. "Mama, can Uncle Douglas be our bonus dad?" Emma asked. Lee couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She managed a nod, and suddenly both twins were hugging her. And Douglas was there too, his arms encompassing all of them in an embrace that felt like home and safety and family. "I should warn you," Lee managed, laughing through tears. "They're very demanding employers. Benefits package includes endless questions, toy stepping hazards, and 0 sleep on weekends." "I accept the terms," Douglas said solemnly. Then quieter, just for her, "Thank you, for letting me be part of this. For trusting me with them." "Thank you for wanting us," Lee whispered back. "All of us. Chaos and trauma and complicated grief included. Especially that. You don't get the joy without the complicated parts. That's what makes it real." The pancakes burned while they stood there, tangled together, building something new from the ashes of what was lost. Later that morning, after breakfast was remade by Douglas, despite Lee's protests, and the twins were occupied with an elaborate art project, Lee found herself in Robbie's study. She'd been avoiding it for weeks, this room full of his things, his scent slowly fading from the furniture. Douglas found her there, standing in front of the bookshelf, running her fingers over titles Robbie had loved. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. The twins just asked you to be their father. I should be happy. I am happy. But I also feel like I'm erasing him. Replacing him. Moving on too fast." "Lay." Douglas moved to stand beside her. "You're not erasing anyone. Look around this room. His pictures are still on the walls, his books are still here. You talk about him with the twins, they know who he was, what he did, that he loved them. That's not erasure. That's honoring his memory, while still living your life. What if I forget things? What if in 5 years, I can't remember the exact sound of his laugh or the way he used to hum off key while cooking? What if the twins forget him entirely? Then we remind them. With stories and pictures and visits to his grave." And Lay Douglas turned her to face him. "Robbie would want you to move forward. He said so in that letter. He gave us his blessing. You're not betraying him by choosing happiness. I know that in my head. But my heart, your heart is allowed to be complicated. You can love what you had with Robbie and still want what we're building. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Lee leaned into him. Let him hold her while she worked through the tangle of emotions, grief and joy, past and future, loss and possibility, all coexisting in the same space, the same heart. The twins calling you bonus dad, she said eventually. How do you feel about that? Terrified, honored, completely unqualified. Douglas's laugh was shaky. I'm the Alpha King, Lay. I've commanded armies, negotiated international pact treaties, faced down corrupt council members. But the idea of being responsible for two tiny humans who trust me to guide them through life, that's the most intimidating thing I've ever done. Welcome to parenthood. The terror never really goes away. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be honest. Lee pulled back to look at him. But Douglas, you're already doing it. You've been doing it for 6 weeks. The bedtime stories. The fort building. The way you take their ridiculous questions seriously. You're already their bonus dad. Today just made it official. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs stroking across her cheekbones. I love you. I know we're taking this slow. I know you're not ready for the mate bond, but I need you to know I love you, Lee. Not because of some promise to Robbie. Not out of duty or obligation, but because you're brave and fierce and funny and you make me want to be better than I am. Lee's breath caught. He'd shown her in 1,000 ways over the past weeks, but hearing the words, I'm not ready to say it back, she whispered. Not yet. But Douglas, I'm falling. I can feel it happening. And it's terrifying because what if I lose you too? What if I let myself love you and then we'll have whatever time we get, days or decades, and it'll be worth it, Lee. Every minute will be worth it. He pressed his forehead to hers. I'll wait for you to say the words, however long it takes. What if it takes years? Then I'll wait years. I'm not going anywhere. The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, it cracked something open in Lee's chest, something that had been locked down tight since Robbie's death, protecting itself from more pain. Maybe it was time to risk pain for the possibility of joy. Ask me again, she said softly. In a few months. Ask me again. And maybe I'll be ready to say you love me, to say yes to the mate bond, to making this permanent, to forever. Douglas's eyes went wide. Lee, I'm not ready now, but I'm starting to see a future where I could be ready, where I want to be ready. That's progress, right? That's everything. He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. I'll ask again. When the time is right. When you're ready. And if you're never ready, we'll figure out what we can build without the bond. But Lei. His voice went rough with emotion. Thank you. For even considering it. For giving me hope. They stood there in Robbie's study, surrounded by his memory, building a future he'd blessed but would never see. It felt right. Felt like the man who'd loved Lee enough to set her free was watching, approving, maybe even smiling. Live, his letter had said. Love again. She was trying. God, she was trying. That afternoon, Vernon arrived with a pile of legal documents in his usual impeccable timing. Mrs. Rogers, I hate to interrupt domestic bliss, but there are matters that require your attention. He spread papers across the dining table. The council reformation is complete, new oversight committees, victim advocacy boards, mandatory audits. Your testimony and Robbie's evidence were instrumental. Several PAC leaders have requested permission to thank you personally. No thank you tours, Douglas said firmly. Leigh's not a political prop. Agreed. However, Vernon pulled out a specific document. The new council has proposed naming the Victim Recovery and Support Program after Robbie Carney. They want to call it the Carney Initiative. It would provide resources, counseling, and legal advocacy for trafficking victims and their families. Leigh's hands shook as she took the document. Robbie's name. In official letterhead. His legacy. Formalized into something that would help thousands of people. Yes? She said. Voice thick. Absolutely. Yes. He'd want that. He'd be proud of that. There's more. Vernon hesitated, which was unusual for him. His Majesty has been approached by several publishers wanting to tell this story, the corruption, the investigation, the fight for justice. They want authorization for a book, possibly a documentary. No, Lee said immediately. I'm not selling my husband's death for entertainment. What if the proceeds went to the Carney Initiative? Douglas asked quietly. What if telling the story meant more resources for victims? More awareness about trafficking? More pressure to keep the reforms in place? Lee wanted to refuse. Wanted to keep their story private. Protected. But Robbie hadn't kept his investigation private. He'd risked everything to expose the truth because he believed truth mattered, believed justice was worth any cost. "I want approval over everything," she said finally. "Every word, every detail. I want Robbie portrayed accurately, not as a perfect hero, but as a complicated man who tried to do the right thing. And I want the victims' stories centered, not just the dramatic investigation parts." Vernon nodded, making notes. "I'll negotiate those terms. And Mrs. Rogers, one more thing." He pulled out a final document. "Your inheritance from the estate. With interest and investment returns, it's now valued at $14 million. This document establishes a trust for the twins' education and future. With you as primary beneficiary, you'll never have to worry about money again." $14 million. It still didn't feel real. Lee had gone from $5 in a parking lot to more money than she could spend in multiple lifetimes. "I want to donate some of it," she said. "To the Carney Initiative, to trafficking victim support, to—" "Already done," Douglas interrupted gently. "I've been matching donations in your name for the past 6 weeks, $5 million so far." "I thought you'd want the money working for good." Of course he had. Because he knew her, understood what mattered to her, acted on that understanding without needing praise or recognition. Lei looked at this alpha king who'd fought for her, protected her children, honored her dead husband's memory, and was slowly, patiently winning her heart, and felt the last walls around that heart start to crumble. Not yet. She wasn't ready to say the words yet. But soon. Maybe very soon. That night, after the twins were in bed and the estate had settled into quiet, Lee stood on her balcony, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Douglas joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "To new beginnings," he said, offering her a glass. "To new beginnings," Lee echoed. They clinked glasses, drank, stood in comfortable silence. "I talked to my mom today," Lee said eventually. She hadn't spoken to her mother since before Robbie died. Their relationship was complicated, strained by years of disapproval over Lee's choices. "Told her about you, about the twins, about everything that's happened." "How did she take it?" "She said I was moving too fast. That 6 months wasn't long enough to grieve. That getting involved with someone new was disrespectful to Robbie's memory." Lee's grip tightened on her wine glass. "She's never understood me. Never understood that grief doesn't follow a schedule, that love doesn't expire just because someone dies." "What did you tell her?" "That I was happy, that my children were safe and loved, that I was building a life worth living, and that her approval wasn't required." Lee smiled slightly. "She hung up on me. I'm sorry. I'm not. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what I want over what people think I should want. That feels powerful." Douglas set down his wine glass, pulled her into his arms. "You are powerful. You're the strongest person I know, Lee Rogers. And I'm honored to stand beside you." Lei let herself sink into his embrace, breathing in his scent, pine and snow and home. "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad the twins love you. I'm glad I kissed you that day in the study. I'm just glad. Glad is good. I'll take glad." They stood there as the stars multiplied overhead, as the night deepened around them, as the future unfolded with all its terrifying, beautiful possibilities. Somewhere in that sky, Lee liked to imagine Robbie was watching, smiling, approving of the man who'd kept his promise, who'd loved Robbie's family the way he'd asked. "Thank you," she thought toward the stars. "Thank you for Douglas. Thank you for blessing this. Thank you for loving me enough to let me go." The stars didn't answer, but somehow, Lei felt the approval anyway. Tomorrow they'd face more challenges. The twins would have nightmares. The media would demand statements. The trials would require testimony. Life would be complicated and messy and hard. But tonight, wrapped in an alpha's arms, surrounded by safety and possibility, Lee let herself simply be happy, and that was enough. Chapter 10. Forever starts today. 6 months later. Spring had transformed the estate into something from a fairy tale. Cherry blossoms drifted across manicured lawns. The gardens exploded with color, and the air carried the sweet promise of new beginnings. Lee stood in front of the full-length mirror in her suite, barely recognizing the woman staring back. The dress was simple but elegant cream-colored silk that flowed to her ankles, with delicate lace at the shoulders. Her hair was loose, the way Douglas preferred it, with small white flowers woven through the waves. She wore minimal makeup except for the dark lipstick that made her feel fierce and beautiful. She looked like a bride. She felt like someone who'd survived the impossible and found joy on the other side. "Mama, you look like a princess." Emma burst into the room, her own flower girl dress a miniature version of Lee's pink tulle and ribbons and enough sparkle to satisfy any 4-year-old's dreams. "You look like a princess too, baby." Lee crouched carefully, mindful of her dress. "Are you excited?" "So excited. Ethan and I get to throw flowers, and then Uncle Douglas becomes our real bonus dad forever, and then there's cake." Emma's priorities were clear. Ethan appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in his tiny suit. "Mama? Do I have to wear this tie?" "It's strangling me." "It's barely touching you, Drama King. But come here. I'll loosen it." Lee adjusted his collar, ran her fingers through his hair. Robbie's hair. That same unruly texture that never quite cooperated. "How do you feel about today? Really?" Ethan's face went serious. "Are you happy, Mama? Like really, really happy?" "Really, really happy." "Then I'm happy too. Uncle Douglas is nice. He teaches me cool stuff and doesn't get mad when I ask a million questions. And he makes you smile." Ethan paused. "I think Daddy would like him." Lee's throat closed. "I think Daddy would love him. I think Daddy sent him to us. Like a present from heaven?" "Exactly like that." A knock on the door. Patrika entered, looking elegant in a lavender dress. "Mrs. Rogers, it's time. Everyone's waiting." This was it. No turning back now. Not that Lee wanted to turn back. 3 months ago, Douglas had asked her again down on one knee in the garden where the twins were playing, his voice shaking with hope and fear. "Will you be my mate? Will you let me love you and your children for the rest of our lives? Will you marry me?" She'd said yes without hesitation. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it no longer consumed her. She'd learned to carry it alongside joy, to honor the past while embracing the future. Robbie would always be her first love. Douglas was her second chance. Both could be true simultaneously. The ceremony was being held in the estate's rose garden, intimate, just close family and friends. 50 guests instead of the hundreds an Alpha King's wedding would traditionally require. Douglas had insisted on small, personal, focused on what mattered rather than political spectacle. Vernon waited at the bottom of the stairs to escort her. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Rogers. Though I suppose in a few minutes, you'll be Mrs. Hammond." He offered his arm. "Ready to become a queen?" "I'm ready to become Douglas's mate. The queen part is just a bonus." Vernon's smile was warm. "He's a lucky man. Though between you and me, I think you're the lucky one." He does an excellent dragon voice for bedtime stories. Lee laughed, the nerves settling. This was right. This was good. This was the life she was choosing. They walked through the estate, past staff who'd become family, past rooms where memories had been made and healing had happened, out into the garden where white chairs lined a petal-strewn aisle, where cherry blossoms drifted like snow, where Douglas waited. He stood at the altar, a simple wooden arch, covered in roses, wearing a dark suit that made him look like every Omega's fantasy of a powerful alpha. But when his eyes found hers, all that power gentled into something tender and awed. "You're beautiful," he mouthed. "You're not bad yourself," she mouthed back. The twins preceded her down the aisle, Emma scattering petals with enthusiasm while Ethan walked with exaggerated care, clearly terrified of tripping. They reached the altar and took their places beside Douglas, because this wasn't just a wedding between two people. It was a family choosing each other. Then Lee walked, Vernon at her side, toward the alpha who'd saved her life in every way that mattered. The officiant was Marlene Klein, her niece. Yesenia had been recovered and was in therapy, healing slowly but steadily. Marlene had insisted on performing the ceremony, calling it an honor to unite the people who'd given her family back. "We gather today," Marlene began, her voice carrying across the garden, "to witness the joining of two souls who've known darkness and chosen light. Lee Rogers and Douglas Hammond come before us not as strangers, but as partners who've already proven their commitment through trials that would break lesser bonds." Lee barely heard the traditional words. She was too focused on Douglas's hands holding hers, on the way he looked at her like she was his entire world, on Emma and Ethan standing beside them with matching grins. "Douglas," Marlene said, "do you take Lee as your mate, your partner, your equal? Do you promise to love her children as your own, to honor the memory of the man who came before you, and to build a future worthy of the sacrifices that brought you together?" I do. Douglas's voice was steady, certain. I promise to love Lay with everything I am. To protect her and her children with my life. To honor Robbie's memory by being the man he believed I could be. And to spend every day earning the trust she's placed in me. Lay, do you take Douglas as your mate, your partner, your equal? Do you promise to let him love you, to build a new life without forgetting the old, and to choose joy even when grief whispers that you don't deserve it? Lee's voice shook but held. I do. I promise to love Douglas with my whole heart, the parts that are healed, and the parts still healing, to let him be father to my children, knowing he'll never replace the one they lost but will give them something equally precious, and to choose happiness, every day, because that's what Robbie wanted for me, for us. Marlene smiled. Then by the power vested in me by Pack Law and the Northern Territories, I declare you mates. Douglas, you may. He didn't wait for permission. Douglas pulled Lee into his arms and kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. The garden erupted in applause and cheers. But Lee heard nothing except her own heartbeat, felt nothing except the rightness of his mouth on hers, tasted nothing except the future on his lips. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Douglas pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, he whispered. My fierce Omega. My queen. My everything. I love you too. The words came easily now, without guilt or hesitation. My alpha. My bonus dad to the twins. My second chance. Emma and Ethan tackled them both, wrapping small arms around their legs, shrieking with joy. Douglas scooped them up one in each arm, while keeping one hand linked with Lay's. We're a family, Emma announced to the assembled guests. A real forever family. Forever and always, Douglas confirmed, his eyes never leaving Lee's face. The reception was held in a massive tent on the grounds, elegant but warm, with fairy lights strung overhead and tables laden with food. The twins ran wild with other children, their laughter echoing across the lawn. Pack leaders and dignitaries mingled with estate staff and friends, the hierarchy dissolved by genuine celebration. Douglas pulled Lay onto the dance floor for their first dance as mates. The song was one Robbie had loved, a bittersweet choice that honored the past while celebrating the present. Are you happy? Douglas asked, as they swayed together. Truly? Deliriously, terrifyingly, completely. Lay smiled up at him. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to be too good to be true. It's real. We're real. And Lee. He spun her gently. I'm going to spend the rest of our lives making sure you never doubt that. That's a long time. You sure you're up for it? I've fought wars, faced corrupt alphas, survived political intrigue. How hard can forever with you be? You have no idea what you've signed up for. The twins are entering the why phase. Every question leads to 17 more questions. It's exhausting. I'll learn to love it. Douglas pulled her closer. I'll learn to love every difficult, chaotic, beautiful part of this life. Because it's ours. Ours, Hem. Over his shoulder Lay spotted Vernon talking animatedly with Patrika, both of them watching the dance floor with matching expressions of satisfaction, two people who'd orchestrated so much of this happy ending. She saw Marlene Klein with her arm around Yesenia, the young woman still fragile but smiling, healing. Saw other former victims who'd been recovered because of Robbie's evidence, because of their testimony. 43 lives saved, 43 families reunited. And she saw Emma and Ethan, racing around with cake-smeared faces, their laughter pure and untroubled. Safe. Loved. Whole. This was what Robbie had died for. Not just exposing corruption, but creating a world where children could laugh without fear, where families could heal, where second chances were possible. Thank you, Lee whispered against Douglas's chest. For what? For finding me, for being patient, for loving my children, for giving me permission to be happy. She pulled back to look at him. For everything. You don't need to thank me for loving you. That's the easiest thing I've ever done. Douglas kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. But you're welcome anyway. The song ended. The twins appeared, demanding their turn to dance with our bonus dad. Douglas swept them into an elaborate waltz that was more laughter than actual dancing, all three of them stumbling and spinning and completely joyful. Lee stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching her family, the one she'd built from ruins, the one that honored the past while embracing the future, and felt peace settle into her bones. She would always carry Robbie with her. His love had shaped her. His sacrifice had saved countless lives. His final gift had brought Douglas into their lives. That was a legacy worth celebrating, not hiding from. But she was also building something new. A life with Douglas, a future for her children, a love that was different but equally real. Both could exist. Both did exist. And maybe that was the real gift, learning that the heart was big enough to hold multiple truths, multiple loves, multiple versions of forever. The guests had departed, the twins were finally asleep after the sugar high from hell, and Lay found herself alone with her mate, her husband, her Alpha, her Douglas in the suite they now shared. He'd carried her over the threshold with exaggerated ceremony, making her laugh despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. Now they stood by the window, watching moonlight paint the estate in silver. "I have something for you," Douglas said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I've been waiting for the right moment." Inside was a necklace, a delicate silver chain with 3 charms. A wolf for Douglas, 2 smaller wolves for Emma and Ethan, and a 4th charm, a star, for Robbie, Douglas explained quietly. "Because he's part of this family too, part of our story. I never want the twins to forget him, or you to feel like his memory isn't welcome here." Lee's vision blurred with tears. "Douglas, let me put it on you." He moved behind her, his fingers gentle as he clasped the necklace. The charm settled just above her heart, her past and her future. Connected, honored. "It's perfect," she whispered. "You're perfect. I'm not. But I'm trying to be worthy of you. Of this." He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "Lay, I know tonight is traditionally when mates complete the bond. When I'd mark you, claim you officially. But only if you're ready. If you need more time, I'm ready." The certainty in her voice surprised even her. "I'm ready to be completely yours, Douglas. To let you mark me. To bond our lives together. No more holding back. No more fear. Just us." His eyes darkened, his alpha instincts rising. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." What happened next was tender and fierce, passionate and gentle. A claiming that was also a surrender. Douglas marked her with his teeth at the junction of her neck and shoulder, a claiming bite that would scar beautifully, that would tell the world she was mated, protected, loved. The bond snapped into place like a missing puzzle piece finally found. Lee felt his emotions flood through the connection, love and devotion and fierce protectiveness. But also vulnerability and wonder, and the bone-deep relief of finally coming home. "I feel you," she gasped. "Inside my head, my heart, Douglas. I feel everything." "That's the mate bond," he murmured against her marked skin. "We're connected now. Forever. What I feel, you feel. My pain is yours. My joy is yours. We're one. That's terrifying and amazing. Welcome to mating an Alpha King." His smile was wicked and tender. Too late to back out now. God. Wouldn't dream of it. They made love until the moon set, and dawn threatened the horizon, claiming and reclaiming, learning each other's bodies with the patience of people who had lifetimes ahead of them. The mate bond pulsed between them, a living connection that made every touch more intense, every kiss more meaningful. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Lee's fingers tracing the mark she'd left on Douglas's shoulder, smaller than his, but equally permanent. "I'm glad you found me," she said sleepily. "In that parking lot, with my $5 and my sleeping twins. I'm glad you didn't give up looking. I would have searched forever." Douglas's arms tightened around her. "You and those kids, you're my pack now. My family. Nothing in this world could make me give up on you. Even when the twins are teenagers and hate us? Especially then. Though I'm terrified of that phase already." Lay laughed, the sound mixing with a yawn. "We have years before we have to worry about that." "Years," Douglas echoed. "Decades. A lifetime. All of it with you." As sleep claimed her, wrapped in her mate's arms, the bond humming contentedly between them, Lee's last conscious thought was gratitude. Gratitude for Robbie, who'd loved her enough to set her free. Gratitude for Douglas, who'd been patient enough to wait for her to be ready. Gratitude for Emma and Ethan, who'd adapted and thrived and loved with open hearts. And gratitude for herself for being brave enough to survive loss, strong enough to accept help, and wise enough to choose happiness when it was offered. This wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life she had, and it was beautiful. Epilogue. 2 years later. Lee stood in the estate's nursery, newly renovated, painted in soft yellows and greens, holding her newborn daughter against her chest. Little Diane had her father's ice blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, and at 3 weeks old, she'd already wrapped the entire household around her tiny fingers. Emma and Ethan, now 6 years old, sat on the floor, arguing about who got to hold their baby sister next. "I held her for 5 minutes. You held her for 6, Emma insisted. "Did not. You got her for way longer." "Did too. Kids," Lee said tiredly. "How about neither of you holds her right now, and we let the baby sleep?" "But Mama," Douglas appeared in the doorway. Still in his work clothes, he'd been in meetings with pack leaders all day. "I heard arguing. Do I need to establish a baby-holding schedule with arbitration and appeals process?" Both twins giggled. "Daddy's being silly again," Ethan said. "Daddy. No more Uncle Douglas or bonus dad. Just Daddy," said with the easy acceptance of children who'd never known him as anything else. They still talked about Robbie, still visited his grave, still asked questions about him. But Douglas was their father in every way that mattered. "Silly is my natural state," Douglas said, crossing the room to kiss Lee's forehead, then peer down at his sleeping daughter. "She's perfect, just like her mother. She's going to be spoiled rotten, between you and the twins and Patrika and Vernon, as she should be. She's a princess. Specifically, she's my princess." Douglas gently stroked Diane's cheek with one finger. "My girls. All 3 of them." Through the mate bond, Lee felt his contentment, his joy, his bone-deep happiness. It mirrored her own. This life, chaotic and loud and exhausting and beautiful, this was everything she'd thought she'd lost when Robbie died. Everything and more. The Carney Initiative had expanded to 12 states, hundreds of victims had been recovered, the council reformation had held, despite some resistance. Douglas's leadership had ushered in an era of unprecedented cooperation between packs, and Lee had found her own calling. Advocating for Omega rights, working with survivors, using her platform as Alpha Queen to make real change. She was busy, exhausted, pulled in 17 directions at once, and happier than she'd ever imagined possible. "Mama, can we go see Daddy's stone tomorrow?" Ethan asked suddenly. "I want to tell him about Diane. And show him the picture I drew of our family." Lee's throat tightened. They visited Robbie's grave once a month, sometimes more if the kids requested it. The twins talked to him like he could hear them, told him about school and friends, and their new baby sister. "Of course, baby. We'll go tomorrow." "Will you come, Daddy?" Emma asked Douglas. "Always. Your first father is part of this family too. He'd want to know about his sister. Because Diane carried Robbie's legacy too, even though she'd never meet him. Her middle name was Roberta, a promise that he'd never be forgotten." That night, after the twins were in bed, and Diane was sleeping in her bassinet, Lee and Douglas sat on their balcony under the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Lee asked. "Taking on a widow with 2 kids, all our trauma and complications." Douglas pulled her into his lap, the mate bond singing with his absolute certainty. "Not for a single second. You 3 are the best thing that ever happened to me. This," he gestured at the estate, the sleeping house, their life. "This is everything I didn't know I needed. We're a lot of work. The best things always are." He kissed her temple. "Besides, I like challenges. Keeps me sharp. Wait until Diane is a teenager, then we'll talk about challenges. We'll handle it, together." Douglas's arms tightened around her. "That's what mates do. What family does. We face the chaos together." Lee relaxed into his embrace, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, she liked to think Robbie was watching too. Proud of his children, grateful for Douglas, at peace knowing his family was loved and safe. "Thank you," she thought toward the stars. "For everything. For the time we had. For the man you sent to love us after you were gone. For giving me permission to be happy." The stars didn't answer. But through the mate bond, she felt Douglas's love wrapping around her like a promise. Tomorrow they'd visit Robbie's grave. Next week they'd deal with council politics. Next month Emma started kindergarten, and Ethan would lose his first tooth, and Diane would probably sleep through the night. Probably. Life would be messy and beautiful and complicated and perfect. But tonight, under the stars, with her mate's arms around her, and her children sleeping safely inside, Lee was simply grateful. For second chances. For found family. For love that survived loss and bloomed again in the ruins. For happiness that honored the past while embracing the future. For this life imperfect and healing and absolutely worth every struggle. She'd started with $5 in a parking lot, alone and terrified. She'd ended up with everything. And that was the greatest love story of all. Thank you for allowing me to bring this emotional Omegaverse journey to life. Lee, Douglas, Emma, and Ethan's story of loss, healing, and found family has been a beautiful one to tell. I hope their journey from that desperate parking lot to their forever family touched your heart as much as it did mine.